If this quiet journey brings you comfort, feel free to like the video before we begin. It helps guide more sleepy minds to these stories of the past. Chapter 1. The Founding of Rome. In the hush of an ancient Italian twilight, a gentle river winds through green plains. Along the banks of the Tiber, legend says, a humble trough carrying 2 infant boys drifted quietly in the current. The babies had been left to fate by a jealous king, but fate had other plans. As dusk settles, a she-wolf emerges from the forest, her eyes soft and watchful. She hears the whimpers of the twins and approaches without harm. In this mythical dusk, the wolf lies down and nurses the hungry infants, warming them with her fur. A woodpecker calls calmly from the trees, as if blessing this strange and gentle scene. Thus were Romulus and Remus, the legendary twin sons of Mars, saved from peril by nature's tender mercy. Under a canopy of stars, the twins are eventually discovered by a shepherd, Faustulus, who raises them as his own sons. We imagine the boys growing up strong and spirited in the pastoral quiet, unaware of their royal blood. When they learn of their true heritage as princes of Alba Longa, they resolve to found a new city on the very spot where the she-wolf had nurtured them. In the soft golden light of morning, Romulus and Remus mark the boundaries of their city to be on the Palatine Hill, overlooking the flowing Tiber. But the peace of dawn cannot hold back human destiny. A quarrel erupts between the brothers over who will rule this new settlement. In a tragic instant, Remus is killed, some say by accident, others say by Romulus's own hand. Remus's fall is swift, and Romulus is left standing in sorrow and resolve as the sunlight breaks through the clouds. With a heavy heart, Romulus becomes the first king of Rome, named for himself. It is April 21, 753 B.C., according to later Roman memory, when the city of Rome is born. In our mind's eye, we see Romulus atop the Palatine Hill at sunset, cloaked in a wolfskin shawl, looking out over simple thatch roof huts and the winding river beyond. He welcomes fugitives and exiles into his nascent city, offering asylum to the hopeful and the hopeless alike. To provide these new citizens with families, Romulus famously reaches out to the neighboring Sabines in a dramatic legend of feasting and abduction. Yet eventually, this conflict resolves in unity, and Sabine and Roman become one people under a shared moonlit treaty. Through war and peace, Romulus rules for many years until, as legends tell, one day he vanishes in a mysterious storm, believed to have been taken up by the gods. The Romans, in their reverence, will later worship him as Quirinus, a god of the city. Thus begins the story of Rome, born from tragedy and nurtured by myth, a tiny community of huts on 7 hills that will one day encompass the known world. In the gentle night that follows Romulus's reign, the citizens of Rome light simple oil lamps and tell stories of their wolf-nursed founder. The aroma of wood smoke drifts through the dark, and the first chapter of Rome's history drifts into legend and memory, quiet as a dream. Chapter 2. The Age of Kings. After Romulus, Rome is ruled by a line of 7 legendary kings. We journey through these early generations, as though in a soft-focused dream, the details, half lost to time, the atmosphere calm and archaic. Each king leaves a unique imprint on the young city, guiding it from a rough frontier settlement to a modest urban center. The second king, Numa Pompilius, is said to be a wise Sabine farmer who loves peace. One can imagine Numa in the early morning mist, walking to a simple shrine, bringing offerings of milk and grain. He establishes Rome's first religious traditions and the office of the Vestal Virgins, teaching the Romans to honor the gods by the hearth's gentle glow. During Numa's reign, the gates of the Temple of Janus remain closed in peace, and the growing city learns the rhythms of worship and law in a time of tranquility. The calm of Numa's era gives way to the more fiery spirit of Tullus Hostilius, the third king, who is braver in war. We picture him as a young warrior king under the high midday sun, leading Romans to battle against their neighbors. It was Tullus, legend says, who destroyed Alba Longa, the twins' ancestral city, and brought its people to Rome. Yet even these wars, remembered dimly, unfold like a distant thunderstorm, violent but passing, with blue skies soon returning. The fourth king, Ancus Marcius, reputedly a grandson of Numa, strikes a balance between piety and strength. Under Ancus's rule, new city walls are built, and Rome's first bridge is flung across the Tiber's glimmering waters. We can almost hear the steady thud of wooden pilings being driven into the riverbed, and imagine merchants and villagers crossing the Tiber on that early bridge at dawn, bringing salt and fish to market. Ancus also establishes the port of Ostia on the seacoast, giving Rome access to the vast, whispering sea. The salt breeze from the Mediterranean begins to mingle with the scents of the Roman Forum's marketplace. Next come the Etruscan kings, who bring a touch of foreign sophistication to Rome's rustic ways. Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, the fifth king, known as Tarquin the Elder, arrives in Rome with wealth and ambition. We see him in our mind's eye introducing grand projects. The Circus Maximus is laid out under his reign, and chariot races begin to thrill the crowds on festival days, the thunder of hooves echoing off the surrounding hills. He also initiates construction of the great temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill, envisioning a mighty sanctuary to Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva. By now, Rome is growing from a village into a true town. The simple clay huts of Romulus's time are giving way to sturdier homes of wood and brick. In the Forum, a public gathering space that was once just a grassy clearing, wooden booths and stalls appear, where merchants sell meat, pottery, and cloth. The voices of barter and gossip rise with the smoke from cooking fires, and daily life becomes a little more bustling. Tarquin's successor, Servius Tullius, the sixth king, continues this gentle transformation. Servius, born a slave according to legend, is a pragmatic and organizing ruler. We can imagine him on an overcast morning, surveying the city from the Capitoline Hill and planning its streets. He is credited with ordering the first census of Rome's people and dividing society into classes based on wealth, a practical but peaceful reform that helps the city know itself. To protect the growing population, Servius builds a defensive wall around Rome. Later generations would call it the Servian Wall. In the evenings, under torchlight, the townsfolk might walk atop these new ramparts, feeling safe as they gaze out over darkening fields beyond. Servius Tullius's Rome is still a simple place, where cattle roam at the city's edges and families gather in courtyards at dusk, but it is increasingly organized and secure. The last of these early kings is Lucius Tarquinius, Superbus, Tarquin the Proud. His very name suggests arrogance, and indeed, his reign is remembered as harsh and repressive. Picture a late afternoon with storm clouds gathering. The mood in Rome grows uneasy under Tarquin's heavy hand. He finishes the great temple of Jupiter Capitolinus in monumental stone and terracotta, a structure so magnificent that it seems out of proportion to the little city beneath it. The temple's doors are gilded and its roof gleams, but there is little joy in the streets. Tarquin rules without kindness, and a darkness gathers in the hearts of the people. The king's family carries on with impunity until a terrible crime late in Tarquin's reign breaks the spell of fear. One fateful night, Tarquin's son violates a noblewoman named Lucretia, a lady famed for her virtue and grace. The violation of Lucretia's honor shocks the city's conscience. In a quiet courtyard at dawn, Lucretia, overwhelmed by grief, takes her own life in front of her kinsmen, having beseeched them to seek justice. Her tragic end is like a lightning bolt in the morning sky, illuminating the true nature of Tarquin's tyranny. Outrage spreads silently from house to house, and the Romans, who have endured Tarquin's cruelty, finally unite in anger and sorrow. Led by Lucius Junius Brutus, the men of Rome carry Lucretia's body into the Forum, where even the stones seem to weep in the dim light. There, Brutus lifts his sword and swears an oath that no king will ever rule Rome again. The people, patricians, and commoners alike join this oath. It is 509 B.C., and a gentle revolution takes shape. With surprisingly little bloodshed, Tarquin the Proud is deposed and sent into exile. Under cloudy skies, the gates of Rome are closed to kings forever. The monarchy has ended, washed away by a wave of collective resolve. In its place, a new form of government begins to dawn, a res publica, the public affair, or republic. As the last king's chariot disappears down the road into the misty distance, the city feels a profound sigh of relief. Women venture out into the streets again. Men clasp forearms in newfound fellowship, and oil lamps burn late into the night as Romans discuss how they will govern themselves in this new era. The age of kings, with its legends and excesses, recedes into the past like a fading lullaby. Ahead lies the era of the Roman Republic, born from both the high ideals and the deep sorrows of those early days. Chapter 3: The Early Republic. Morning breaks on a Rome without kings. The year is still 509 B.C., the air crisp with anticipation. In place of a monarch, the Romans established two annually elected leaders, called consuls, to guide the state. Imagine the first consul elections held in the Forum under a pale blue sky. Citizens gathered calmly in their voting assemblies, the murmur of their voices respectful and resolved. Lucius Junius Brutus, hero of the revolution, is chosen as one of the first consuls. Alongside him is Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus, Lucretia's widowed husband, as the other consul. These two men stand before the people in their white togas bordered with purple, symbols of their new office. In solemn ceremony, they swear to uphold the laws and never allow the return of tyranny. From now on, Rome's highest power will be divided and limited, a clear, calming balance to prevent any single man from seizing sole control. Under the fresh principles of the Republic, the Senate remains as an advisory council, filled with elder statesmen, mostly aristocratic patricians, who share wisdom and guide policy. We can picture the Senate meeting in the early years inside a modest hall, the Curia, sunlight slanting through high windows onto the marble floor. The senators, dignified but no longer subservient to a king, debate matters of state. Their words echo in the chamber in measured, thoughtful tones, and each man knows he serves at the people's pleasure. For ordinary Romans, the farmers, artisans, and traders' daily life doesn't change overnight, but there is a new sense of freedom in the air, like a gentle spring breeze after a long winter. Still, not all is perfectly equal or fair in the young republic. Patricians, the old noble families, hold most of the power, and plebeians, the common people, struggle for a greater voice. In these early decades, the plebeians realize that while the monarchy is gone, aristocratic dominance remains, and so, gradually, they begin to press for their rights. Picture a group of plebeian citizens, one warm afternoon, gathering on the sacred hill outside the city in what will be remembered as the first secession of the plebs, 494 B.C. They are not angry or violent, just determined. By calmly withdrawing from the city and refusing to work or fight in the army, these common folk make their voices heard. The patricians, recognizing the need for harmony, negotiate and create a new office. The tribune of the plebs, magistrates who have the sacred power to protect common citizens and veto unjust laws. The tribune's house is left open day and night, a lamp always lit, so any plebeian can come seek help. With each small victory like this, the republic finds its balance, like a boat steadying itself on gentle waves. In 450 B.C., to prevent abuses of unwritten custom, the Romans take a major step towards fairness. They engrave their laws on bronze tablets, known as the 12 Tables, and display them in the forum for all to see. Imagine visiting the bustling forum on a sunny morning, hearing the coo of pigeons and the calls of merchants, and seeing families gathered around the bronze tablets. Mothers lift their children to read the laws etched in clear Latin letters, laws about property, debt, and family rights. The children's fingers trace the cool metal as they sound out the words. For the first time, every Roman, rich or poor, knows the rules that govern them. This transparency brings a sense of security and order. Disputes are now settled by referring to these public laws rather than the whims of the powerful. In the evenings, as the crowd disperses and the bronze tablets glow in the setting sun, one can sense that a foundation of justice has been laid. During these early Republican years, Rome begins to expand its influence across the Italian peninsula. There are occasional conflicts with neighboring peoples, Latin towns, Etruscan cities, and Italian hill tribes. But these wars are seasonal, limited, often punctuated by long truces and negotiations. A notable threat arises in 390 B.C., when wild Gallic tribes from the north swoop down and attack the city of Rome itself. In the quiet dawn after the Battle of the Allia, Romans awaken to find their city in flames. The Gauls sack Rome in a frenzy, and legend says the honking of sacred geese on the Capitoline Hill alerts the last defenders to save the citadel. This could have been the end of the Roman story, but it is not. Out of the ashes steps a hero, Marcus Furius Camillus. Under his leadership, the Romans rally and drive out the Gauls. We can visualize Camillus, grey-haired yet vigorous, returning to Rome's ruins under a clear blue sky, vowing to rebuild. And rebuild they do. Houses are repaired, new walls erected stronger than before, and slowly, the life of the city resumes. The trauma of the Gallic sack leaves a deep impression. Romans will speak of it with a shudder for centuries, but it also steels their resolve. Never again, they swear, shall Rome be caught unprepared. By 338 B.C., after years of on and off skirmishes and alliances with other Latin cities, Rome emerges as the dominant power in Latium, the region around the city. We imagine Italian hillsides dotted with vineyards and pastures, now increasingly under Roman governance. Yet the local inhabitants granted varying degrees of Roman citizenship and rights. This inclusion, though not always equal, spreads the Pax Romana in its nascent form Roman peace and order through central Italy. In 312 B.C., the Romans cut and paved the first stretch of the Appian Way, a straight stone road reaching south to Capua. On a warm afternoon, travelers marvel at this marvel of engineering, a smooth road under their sandaled feet, shaded at intervals by trees, making journeys swifter and safer. Such roads will become the arteries of the growing republic, uniting distant towns with the capital. Rome's expansion is not all through force. Much comes from shrewd diplomacy and the granting of citizenship to former foes. But conflict is unavoidable at times. Throughout the 4th century BC, Rome fights drawn-out wars, with the Samnites mountain people to the southeast and Etruscans to the north. These conflicts last decades, with battles by day and truces by night. We can imagine a Roman camp in the Samnite hills at dusk, soldiers tending cooking fires, the scent of porridge and herbs in the air, weary but confident after another skirmish. In time, Rome prevails. By around 275 B.C., after repelling even the Greek king Pyrrhus of Epirus, whose war elephants astonished the Romans, the city controls almost all of Italy. Come 264 B.C., Rome stands at the dawn of a new era of foreign war and conquest. The once tiny city of Romulus now commands a confederation of Italian allies and a citizen army hardened by experience. The 7 hills of Rome bustle with perhaps a couple 100,000 souls, and the Forum hums with trade of Italian, grain, olives, and wine. Bronze-armored legionaries march out through the city gates each spring, their armor gleaming in the sun, while families wave farewell with pride and only a touch of anxiety. The Republic, hardly 2 centuries old, is confident and vigorous, ready to face whatever challenges the wider world might bring. As a golden Italian sunset bathes Rome's rooftops, there is a sense that this community, once nurtured by a wolf and guided by kings, has come of age. The Romans have proven resilient and resourceful. Now their horizons are about to broaden across the sea, ushering in adventures and trials that will shape their destiny as an empire. Chapter 4. The Republic expands and triumphs. With Italy under its sway, Rome's gaze turns across the shimmering Mediterranean Sea, where new rivals and opportunities await. The first great test of the Republic beyond Italy comes from the rich and powerful trading empire of Carthage on the North African coast. Carthage, with its mighty navy and prosperous harbours, controls much of the western Mediterranean trade. The two rising powers inevitably collide over the fertile island of Sicily, and so begin the epic Punic Wars, a series of 3 titanic struggles that will last over a century. In 264 B.C., the First Punic War ignites. We can picture the turquoise waters around Sicily, disturbed by the oar strokes of hundreds of ships. Rome, initially a land power, hastily builds a fleet to challenge Carthage's mastery at sea. The Romans innovate with a device called the corvus, a boarding bridge, turning naval battles into something like land battles on decks. After 2 decades of hard-fought conflict, naval battles under the scorching sun, siege campaigns around Sicilian hill towns, storms and shipwrecks, the Romans emerge victorious. Sicily becomes Rome's first overseas province, and the Carthaginians retreat, licking their wounds. By 241 B.C., Rome has also seized Sardinia and Corsica from Carthage during a Carthaginian internal revolt. further tightening its grip on the Western Mediterranean. One can imagine a Roman official standing on a docks of Syracuse in Sicily at sunset, watching the Roman standard flutter on the ramparts. The sea breeze carries a salty tang and the promise of new horizons under Roman rule. Peace, however, is fleeting. A few decades later, the Carthaginians seek revenge and redemption under one of history's most brilliant and daring generals, Hannibal Barca. Thus begins the Second Punic War, 218-201 B.C., a conflict that nearly shatters Rome. Hannibal chooses an astonishing strategy. In 218 B.C., he marches an army from Spain over the towering Alps, bringing war, elephants with him, across snowy mountain passes. We imagine the harsh journey, elephants trumpeting in the icy air, Carthaginian soldiers wrapping their cloaks tighter as they trudge through snowdrifts, and Hannibal at the front, eyes set on Italy. When they descend into the Po Valley, it is autumn. The Italian plains spread before them in shades of gold and green, utterly unsuspecting of the storm about to break. Hannibal wins stunning victories on Italian soil. In 216 BC, at Cannae, on a baking hot summer day, he surrounds and annihilates a much larger Roman army by brilliant tactics, inflicting one of the worst defeats in Roman history. The blood-red sunset after that battle finds the Roman Republic at its knees, with tens of thousands of its sons lost. Yet, in this darkest hour, the Romans show a stubborn resilience. Refusing to surrender, they raise new legions from survivors and even freed slaves. The Roman motto becomes, "Never give up." In the beleaguered city, the Senate meets calmly, day after day, devising new strategies. In a poignant scene, we might imagine the elderly senator, Fabius Maximus, nicknamed the Delayer, addressing a small crowd in the forum at dusk. He urges patience and caution, avoiding direct battles with Hannibal and instead harassing his forces, cutting off his supplies, and letting time and distance weaken him. The people listen in respectful quiet. They trust the wisdom of age. For over a decade, Hannibal roams Italy undefeated in battle, but he cannot take Rome itself. The Romans simply refuse to face him head-on again, and Hannibal's isolation deepens. Eventually, the war's tide turns, thanks to Roman endurance and a bold counterstrike. In 204 B.C., a brilliant Roman general in his own right, Publius Cornelius Scipio, later called Scipio Africanus, sails a Roman army across the sea to North Africa, threatening Carthage itself. Hannibal is recalled from Italy to defend his homeland. The final showdown comes at Zama in 202 B.C. under a clear African sky. We envision the dust rising from marching legions and charging elephants. Scipio has studied Hannibal's tactics and found ways to counter them. In a decisive battle, Scipio's forces defeat Hannibal, marking the end of Carthage's ascendancy. After 16 long years, the war is won. Carthage, exhausted and humiliated, sues for peace, surrendering its fleet, its Spanish territories, and paying a heavy indemnity. At last, in 201 B.C., the Second Punic War ends, and Rome stands supreme in the Western Mediterranean. The relief in Italy is palpable. Families who had hidden in hilltop fortresses return to their farms in peace. In Rome, the temples are filled with thankful offerings. One can imagine on a warm afternoon the hero Scipio Africanus climbing the steps of the Capitoline Temple of Jupiter to lay rich Tunisian incense at the altar and give thanks for victory. A gentle wind from the west wafts the sweet smoke over the city. Hannibal, the dread of Italy, has been honorably defeated and later goes into voluntary exile. The Roman Republic has passed through the crucible of near destruction and come out stronger, its people bound together by shared sacrifice. Yet Rome's appetite for dominance is not sated. Even as they dealt with Carthage, the Romans fought wars in the east. In the same climactic year of 202 B.C., they had begun interfering in Greece and Macedon. Soon after Zama, Rome turns full attention to the Hellenistic world. In 197 B.C., at Cynoscephalae, Roman legions decisively defeat King Philip V of Macedon, demonstrating the superiority of the Roman legion over the traditional Macedonian phalanx. Not long after, in 190 B.C., they defeat the Seleucid king Antiochus III in Asia Minor. One by one, the successor kingdoms of Alexander the Great bow to Roman might or Roman diplomacy. The historian Polybius would later marvel at how within a span of 50 years, Rome had conquered the world. The final, merciless act against Carthage comes a half-century later. In 149 B.C., suspicious and fearful of a resurgent Carthage, Rome engineers a pretext for war, the Third Punic War. It is more of a siege than a war. Over 3 years, Roman legions encircle the city of Carthage, cutting off its supplies. In 146 B.C., after bitter street-to-street fighting, Carthage is captured and utterly destroyed. We imagine the once great city in its final moments, black smoke twisting into a glaring sky, the cries of Carthaginian citizens silenced one by one, and Roman soldiers methodically setting buildings aflame. When the fires die, Carthage is no more. The surviving inhabitants are sold into slavery, and the land is cursed and annexed as the Roman province of Africa. It is a harsh and somber ending to Rome's most formidable foe. In the Roman Forum, when the news arrives, there is celebration, but also perhaps a tinge of sadness among the more reflective Romans, who know they have eliminated a rival civilization. The statesman Cato the Elder, who ended every speech with "Carthage must be destroyed," does not live to see it, but his relentless call has been answered. In that same fateful year, 146 B.C., across the sea in Greece, the Romans crush the last resistance of the Achaean League and sack the ancient city of Corinth. The Greek mainland falls completely under Roman control. The Mediterranean world has, in effect, been divided between Rome and the kingdoms of the Far East. The poet Horace would later say, "Captive Greece took captive her rude conqueror." Indeed, though Rome now rules Greece, Greek culture floods into Rome like a gentle, pervasive tide. In the evenings of mid-2 ND century B.C. Rome, you might find Roman nobles reclining at banquets not unlike those of Greek symposiums, listening to readings of Ennius or new Latin translations of Homer's epics. Greek philosophers, Stoics, Epicureans sit on porticos teaching Roman youths about ethics and the presens prive nature of the cosmos. Greek art and mythology inspire new temples and sculptures in the city. We can picture Scipio, Aemilianus, the general who destroyed Carthage, hosting literary circles in his villa's garden at dusk, conversing in educated Greek with scholars, while oil lamps flicker on marble tables and cicadas chirp in the olive trees. The Romans, once culturally provincial, eagerly adopt Greek literature, art, and philosophy. They model their buildings on Greek styles and identify their gods with the Greek pantheon. Zeus with Jupiter, Hera with Juno, etc., enriching their own religious rituals. In a very real sense, Rome conquers Greece with arms, but Greece conquers Rome with ideas, creating a Greco-Roman blend that will define classical antiquity. By 133 B.C., the Roman Republic controls an empire stretching from Spain in the west to Greece and Asia Minor in the east. From the north of Italy down to the sands of North Africa, this rapid expansion brings immense wealth to Rome. We imagine the triumphal processions that parade through the Forum in these years. Victorious generals, imperators, wearing laurel crowns, riding in gilded chariots, displaying wagons overflowing with captured treasure, golden coins, rich tapestries, statues of gods from distant temples. Following them, weary but proud, march prisoners of war in chains, exotic animals like African lions and elephants, and delegations of subdued nations. The Roman crowds cheer along the Via Sacra, children perched on parents' shoulders to catch a glimpse. Each triumph is like a festive pageant, but beneath the celebration lies an undertone. The Republic is no longer a simple city-state. It is the capital of a multi-continental empire. Yet, even as the Republic reaches these dazzling heights, cracks begin to form in its foundation. The very wealth that expansion brings starts to widen the gap between rich and poor. In the countryside, a new class of rich landowners seizes the opportunity to buy up land, often the very farms whose peasant owners died or went bankrupt during the wars. These estates, called latifundia, grow vast, worked by countless slaves captured in war. A quiet countryside evening might now find a humble Roman farmer standing at the edge of what was once his family's small plot, now absorbed into a great estate. The fields are tilled not by citizen farmers, but by chained slaves singing in foreign tongues under the supervision of harsh overseers. In the city, returning soldiers, no longer needed on the farms, find themselves without work. They crowd into Rome's streets, living in insulae, tenement apartments, their mood restless under the glow of street torches at night. The old Roman values of simplicity and shared sacrifice begin to erode as luxury and inequality rise. Senators adorn their atriums with Greek statues and mosaics, host lavish feasts with wine from Rhodes and spices from Syria, while in the Subura, the crowded lower-class quarter, families struggle to afford bread. The Republic's political life grows turbulent. Noble families compete for power more fiercely, aware that controlling Rome now means controlling the world's riches. The seeds of internal conflict are sown silently, like weeds in an untended garden, even as Rome's external glory reaches its zenith. For now, though, in the late 2nd century B.C., the night breezes over Rome carry both pride and uncertainty. The average Roman can take pride that Mare Nostrum, our sea, now describes the Mediterranean. Roman roads and ships carry grain from Sicily and Africa to feed the urban masses. Silver from Spanish mines fills the treasury, and enslaved scholars from Greece educate noble children. From the Atlantic coast of Hispania to the mountains of Macedon and beyond, the world feels the presence of Rome. And yet, somewhere in the quiet Forum, perhaps under the shadow of the old Senate House, as the lanterns are being lit, a cautious voice might quote a line from Ennius. The Roman state stands on delicate scales. Great fortune brings great peril, but such reflections are for philosophers. For now, the Republic basks in the afterglow of victory, unaware that the next chapter will test its very core. Chapter 5: Turmoil and Transformation in the Late Republic. As the 2nd century BC wanes, the city of Rome finds itself restless under the weight of its own success. By day, the Forum still bustles with traders, generals celebrate new conquests, and senators debate under the bright sky. But by night, in the taverns and cramped insulae, whispers of discontent rise like steam. The common citizens, once the backbone of the legions and the farmsteads, struggle in poverty, while aristocrats revel in opulence. This stark inequality begins to tear at the fabric of the Republic, ushering in an era of reform attempts and social upheaval. In 133 B.C., a brave and idealistic tribune of the plebs steps forward, Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus. We picture Tiberius on the rostra, in the Forum on a mild spring morning, his voice clear and earnest as a crowd of poor Romans listens intently. He proposes a land reform. The vast estates taken by the rich would be broken up and redistributed to landless citizens, giving veterans and the poor a plot to farm and to live on. It is a plan both simple and radical, aimed at restoring the class of small farmers that had been the Republic's strength. Many in the crowd murmur approval, hope lighting their eyes, but the senators, especially those whose families hold those sprawling estates, are alarmed and outraged. Despite fierce opposition, Tiberius pushes his law through using the popular assembly. A sense of triumph and possibility fills the air among the common people that day. Rome might correct its course peacefully, but the backlash is swift and brutal. In a scene that shocks Rome, a band of senators and their followers confront Tiberius during a public assembly. Amid the jostling crowd under the afternoon sun, violence flares. Sticks, stones, and chair legs become weapons. Tiberius Gracchus is clubbed to death on the Capitoline Hill, along with many of his supporters. The first blood spilled in the Forum in a political quarrel in centuries. The Tiber River flows red that evening and bodies are cast into its waters. A chill falls over the Republic. Internal dissent has turned deadly. A decade later, Gaius Gracchus, Tiberius's younger brother, takes up the cause with even broader reforms: grain subsidies for the poor, colonies to resettle the landless, and checks on the power of the Senate. He is a brilliant orator. One can imagine Gaius at dusk, addressing a gathering by torchlight, his shadow flickering on the walls as he passionately advocates for the disenfranchised. But he too faces staunch resistance. In 121 BC, surrounded by hostile forces on the Aventine Hill, Gaius Gracchus meets a tragic end, taking his own life, or killed by a slave at his order, to avoid capture, while hundreds of his followers are slain in another bout of political bloodletting. The reforms of the Gracchi are partially enacted, but then rolled back. However, a precedent is set. The Republic's political conflicts can no longer be contained by civil debate. They have entered a darker, more violent phase. In the power vacuum and disillusionment that follow, ambitious generals begin to rise as the new power brokers. The Republic had always been proud of its citizen soldier army led by elected magistrates, but now lifelong soldiers look more to their generals than to the distant Senate for rewards and leadership. Gaius Marius, a common-born military genius from Arpinum, becomes the first such figure. Rugged and pragmatic, Marius wins fame by defeating the invading Numidian king, Jugurtha, and later crushing huge Germanic hordes, the Cimbri and Teutones, that threatened Italy around 105-101 B.C. We see Marius in our mind after the Battle of Aquae Sextii, 102 B.C., standing weary but proud at sunset amid a field of victory, hailed as the third founder of Rome for saving the Republic from the barbarian threat. Marius is elected consul, an unprecedented 7 times. Under the soft glow of lamplight, he institutes sweeping military reforms. He opens the legions to the capitae censi, the head count of landless poor, and arms them at the state's expense. These new soldiers swear loyalty to their general who will secure their pay and retirement land. Inadvertently, Marius has created Rome's first professional army, loyal to its commander as much as to the Republic. Marius's success and new model breed rivalry. An aristocratic but equally talented general, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, emerges, tall, cold-eyed, and with a distinctive red-blonde hair. Sulla has served under Marius but harbors his own ambitions. In 91 B.C., a great rebellion by Rome's Italian allies, the Social War, erupts as these allies demand full citizenship rights. For 3 brutal years, Italy is torn by war, towns besieged and fields burned, until Rome finally grants citizenship to most Italian communities, effectively healing the divide. Both Marius and Sulla distinguish themselves in this conflict, but it's in its aftermath that their rivalry bursts into the open. The spark comes from the east. King Mithridates of Pontus, a cunning ruler on the Black Sea, has massacred tens of thousands of Roman citizens in Asia Minor in 88 B.C. and occupied Roman provinces. The command of the retaliatory expedition is coveted in Rome. The Senate assigns it to Sulla, who is then serving as consul. But Marius, now elderly yet still influential, maneuvers through the popular assembly to strip Sulla of the command and have it given to himself. This unprecedented political coup triggers the unthinkable. Sulla marches on Rome with his legions the first time a Roman army has ever attacked its own capital. In the pre-dawn dimness, Roman citizens wake to the tromp of boots and the glint of swords in torchlight as Sulla's troops force their way through the city gates. Battle erupts in the streets, javelins arc against the dawn sky, and rooftops catch fire. Marius, caught off guard, flees for his life. Legend says he escapes by hiding in the swamps and sailing to Africa, narrowly evading capture. Sulla, victorious, has himself declared dictator, an emergency ruler, to reform the state. But almost immediately, he leaves with his army to fight Mithridates in the east, thus vacating Rome. In his absence, the resilient old Marius returns from exile in 87 B.C., seizes Rome with a coalition of his own forces, and takes brutal revenge on Sulla's supporters. For 5 days, the city endures a chilling purge. Enemies of Marius are hunted down. Many are slain in their homes or in the streets, their bodies left unburied as a warning. Marius, now around 70, is consumed by bitterness. But death soon claims him naturally. He dies just a few weeks after taking power again, in early 86 B.C., perhaps fittingly during a rainy night as thunder echoes over the city. When Sulla finishes his eastern campaign successfully, he returns to Italy in 83 B.C. with his battle-hardened legions. Marching once more on Rome, Sulla defeats the remaining Marian forces in a series of bloody battles. In 82 B.C., Sulla too becomes dictator, but unlike any dictator Rome has seen before, one with no set term limit. Under Sulla's stern gaze, proscriptions are announced. Lists of names published in the Forum, listing enemies of the state who can be killed with impunity and whose properties are confiscated. Rome holds its breath as these lists go up. Each morning, citizens gather anxiously under the colonnades to see if a friend, patron, or even themselves are named. Many meet their end in these years, and Sulla's supporters grow rich from the seized estates. Yet, paradoxically, Sulla uses his absolute power to restore a kind of order. He believes in the old republic, at least in the Senate's authority, and implements conservative reforms. He doubles the size of the Senate, fills it with his loyal men, and curtails the powers of the tribunes to prevent another Gracchus. It is as if he tries to rewind the clock to a calmer time. By 79 B.C., astonishingly, Sulla lays down his dictatorship voluntarily and retires to a quiet life in the countryside, spending his final days fishing and feasting, dying peacefully in his bed a year later. The Republic survives, but the lesson is stark. Armies and generals have proved willing to seize Rome by force, and political violence is the new norm. In the power vacuum after Sulla, new strongmen rise, fueled by personal ambition and popular support. There is Pompey Gnaeus, Pompeius Magnus, whom Sulla had once called Magnus the Great, half mockingly, but who lives up to the title. Pompey, a brilliant young general, earns fame clearing the Mediterranean of pirates and defeating renewed threats by Mithridates. With a keen eye and a proud profile, Pompey in his prime strides through Rome to celebrate triumphs that are like grand festivals. Rose petals rain from rooftops as he parades exotic kings and unimaginable treasure before the adoring public. His conquests stretch Roman dominion further, annexing Syria and Judea in the east. To the people, Pompey is a hero, a new Alexander, it is whispered. Then there is Marcus Licinius Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome, who garnered much of his fortune through shrewd real estate grabs during Sulla's proscriptions. Crassus has his own laurels. In 71 B.C., he crushed the massive Spartacus slave uprising, lining the Appian Way with the crucified bodies of rebel slaves as a grim warning. We imagine Crassus, practical and stern, overseeing the aftermath under a grey winter sky, the moans of the dying in his ears, convinced that order has been restored. And rising alongside them is Julius Caesar, Gaius Julius Caesar, a nobleman with a lineage that claims descent from Venus herself. In the early years, Caesar is a dashing, debt-ridden populist politician, known for giving stirring speeches at the forum's rostra as the sun sets and crowds applaud. He mourned publicly when Sulla executed his allies. He won the civic crown for bravery in battle, and he studied rhetoric in Rhodes. Now, in the 60 seconds B.C., his ambition burns bright, tall, charming, and keenly intelligent. Caesar positions himself as a champion of the people against the senatorial elite. These three figures, Pompey, Crassus, and Caesar, form an informal alliance in 60 B, later dubbed the First Triumvirate. It's a private pact, sealed perhaps in a quiet garden gathering after dusk, away from prying eyes. Pompey has military glory and the love of his troops. Crassus has boundless wealth, and Caesar brings political genius and popular support. Together, they agree to help each other achieve their aims. In 59 B.C., Caesar is elected consul with Crassus and Pompey's backing, and pushes through laws favoring his allies such as land for Pompey's veterans. By the year's end, Caesar secures for himself a plum proconsular command in Gaul, modern France. which will become the staging ground for his own rise to immortality. Now begins Caesar's grand adventure in Gaul, 5850 B.C., which he later immortalizes in his commentaries. We picture the vast forests and rolling hills of Gaul, sometimes shrouded in morning mist, other times golden in late afternoon sun. Caesar, ever bold, takes his legions deep into unknown lands. He battles fierce Gallic tribes, crosses the swift Rhine on a makeshift bridge to impress the Germans, even launches an expedition to the mysterious misty island of Britannia, Britain, in 55 BC. His military campaigns are as brilliant as they are relentless. At the Battle of Alesia in 52 B.C., Caesar besieges the great Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix, the Gallic forces within the hill fort, and those in a massive relief army without press, Caesar's double siege lines. In a dramatic crescendo, the Romans, hungry and outnumbered, repel the Gallic assaults on both sides. When Vercingetorix finally surrenders, riding out on a grey horse and laying his arms at Caesar's feet, Gaul is effectively conquered. Over 8 years, Caesar has expanded Rome's territory to the Atlantic Ocean and won unmatched glory. His dispatches to the Senate, read aloud in the Forum, enthrall the public. Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. He famously writes after a swift victory in the East. Statues of Caesar are quietly placed in Rome, and his name is on every tongue, spoken with admiration by the people, and with envy or fear by many senators. Meanwhile, events in Rome turn the triumvirate's balance uneasy. Crassus, ever hungry for a match in glory, leads an army against the Parthian Empire in the east. But at Cari in 53 B.C., disaster strikes. Crassus is defeated and killed, his legions annihilated by Parthian cavalry. With Crassus gone, the old rivalry between Pompey and Caesar, once checked by alliance, surfaces. Pompey, who stayed in Rome managing affairs as the adults in the room, grows wary of Caesar's soaring fame and power. Pompey aligns more with the Senate aristocracy now, as they see in him a bulwark against Caesar's ambition. By 50 B.C., the Senate, led by Pompey's allies, orders Caesar to lay down his command and return to Rome as a private citizen, effectively threatening him with prosecution and obscurity. Caesar, wintering with his loyal legions by the Rubicon River, the modest border between his province and Italy proper, faces a fateful choice. On a cold January dawn in 49 BC, Caesar decides, Alea iacta est, the die is cast, he supposedly declares, and he leads the 13th Legion across the Rubicon, effectively declaring war on the Senate and Pompey. This moment has an eerie stillness in our imagination. Caesar on horseback, the river's icy waters parting around his horse's legs, his soldiers quietly following, fully aware that there is no turning back. The Roman Republic's civil war has begun. Pompey and the senatorial loyalists, caught off guard, abandon Rome without a B, fight and withdraw to Greece to muster forces. Caesar, in a lightning campaign, marches south to the capital. The ordinary people of Rome watch in awe and relief as Caesar enters the city. He comes not as a tyrant, but as a stern peacemaker, forbidding loot or massacre. For a moment, Rome is calm under Caesar's firm hand. Then he pursues Pompey. On the plains of Pharsalus in Greece, 48 B.C., the two greatest generals of their age clash. We picture the early morning mist lifting to reveal Pompey's grand army, far larger than Caesar's, with senators watching as onlookers, expecting a swift victory. Caesar's veterans, though outnumbered, are hardened and utterly devoted to their commander. In the fierce battle that ensues, Caesar's clever tactics and the discipline of his troops rout Pompey's forces. Pompey himself flees, eventually seeking asylum in Egypt, where he is treacherously assassinated as he steps ashore, gazing perhaps one last time at the sea in which he had once cleared of pirates. The civil war continues against Pompey's remaining supporters across the Mediterranean from North Africa to Spain, but Caesar is inexorable. In each encounter, he prevails. In Egypt, he becomes romantically entangled with the young queen Cleopatra VII, helping her secure her throne amid the Nile's evening breezes and perfumed palaces of Alexandria. Cleopatra, brilliant and charismatic, captivates Caesar. We imagine the two drifting on a royal barge down the Nile at sunset, the river reflecting orange and purple as musicians softly play lyres. Caesar enjoys a brief respite from war, enchanted by ancient Egyptian wonders and Cleopatra's company. A son, Caesarion, is born to them, but duty calls him back to Rome. More battles await in the east, where he famously declares the quick victory, Veni, Vidi, Vici, in Asia Minor and in Spain. By 45 B.C., the war is effectively over. Caesar stands as the unrivaled master of the Roman world. Returning to Rome, Julius Caesar is hailed as dictator for life, dictator perpetuo. The city celebrates with days of feasts and games. The common people adore Caesar. He forgives many of his former enemies, famously showing clemency, clementia. In the Forum, new projects spring up under his direction. A grand basilica, new fora, market squares, and plans for draining marshes and erecting public libraries. He standardizes the calendar, creating the Julian calendar of 365 days with a leap year, essentially the calendar we use today. Rome is buzzing with activity and optimism. It seems a new golden age is dawning, but under the surface, a Republican faction fumes. To traditionalists, Caesar's accumulation of honors and powers, wearing the purple and laurel of a triumphator, putting his likeness on coins, being hailed as almost kingly smacks of the very monarchy Rome had abhorred since the Tarquins. And so, on the Ides of March, March 15, 44 B.C., the shadows of history repeat themselves. In the Theatrum Pompeium, Pompey's theatre turned Senate House, amid the looming statues of old Pompey, Caesar is assassinated by a group of senators who style themselves liberators. The scene is shocking and swift, as Caesar, unarmed and in his toga, takes his seat at a Senate meeting. Conspirators led by Brutus and Cassius suddenly surround him. One takes hold of Caesar's toga, as if to petition, and then steel flashes, daggers thrust into Caesar, again and again. He resists at first, then sees Brutus, possibly his friend among them, and utters, "Et tu, Brute," in heartbroken resignation. Bleeding from 23 wounds, Caesar falls at the base of Pompey's statue, the blood mingling with the dust on the marble floor. The senators, those not involved, flee in panic, their shouts echoing in the colonnades. The assassins step out into the daylight of the Forum, holding aloft their bloody blades and proclaiming the Republic saved. But the city does not rejoice. Instead, a stunned silence and creeping dread fills the streets. The Roman people, who loved Caesar, slip into mourning and anger. In the days after, Caesar's body is displayed in the Forum for a funeral eulogy by his ally Mark Antony. A throng gathers under a hot sun. Antony's words rise in a stentorian voice, praising Caesar's conquests and generosity, reading out Caesar's will, which leaves parks and money to the Roman public. Moved to fury and tears, the crowd riots, burning benches to cremate Caesar's body on an impromptu pyre and attacking the houses of the conspirators, who must flee for their lives. Once again, Rome is on the brink of chaos. But out of this chaos emerges Caesar's chosen heir, his grandnephew Octavian, just 18 years old. Cold-eyed and astute beyond his years, Octavian, soon to style himself Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, allies with Antony and another general, Lepidus, forming the Second Triumvirate in 43 B.C. Together, they raise armies and hunt down Brutus and Cassius, defeating them at the Battle of Philippi in distant Macedonia in 42 B.C. Brutus and Cassius each commit suicide on the field, falling on their swords as the last light of day fades on their cause. What follows is a grim division of the Roman world among the triumvirs. Antony takes the east, and famously, Cleopatra's affections, Octavian holds the west, Lepidus Africa. But Lepidus fades into irrelevance, and soon Octavian and Antony square off in a final struggle for supremacy. In 31 B.C., at the naval battle of Actium off Greece's coast, Octavian's brilliant admiral Agrippa traps and destroys much of Antony and Cleopatra's fleet. The defeated lovers escape to Egypt, where, as Octavian's forces close in, they choose death Antony by falling on his sword, Cleopatra by the bite of an asp, according to legend. With their passing, the long era of civil wars finally ends. It is now 30 B.C. Octavian stands alone at age 33, as the master of the Roman world, much as Caesar had, but wiser in the politics of appearances. He knows Romans of all classes yearn for peace and stability above all, so he carefully restores the facade of the Republic while keeping ultimate power in his own hands. In 27 B.C., Octavian symbolically hands back authority to the Senate and people of Rome, who, grateful and perhaps a bit in awe, bestow upon him the honorific title Augustus, meaning revered one. They also name him princeps, the first citizen, rather than king or dictator, preserving republican veneer, even as everyone understands where real power now lies. The Senate remains, elections continue, but Augustus holds the consulship repeatedly, accumulates tribunician power to veto and propose laws, and commands the loyalty of the legions. The Republic has quietly become the empire, with Augustus as its first emperor in all but name. On a fine day in January, the golden age of Pax Romana begins. The Civil War's memories drift away like smoke from a burnt-out pyre. Augustus is at the helm, and Rome is ready for peace. We imagine him presiding over a sacrifice at the Temple of Janus. The gates of this temple of war, which had been open through all the years of conflict, are now ceremoniously closed, signifying peace across the whole empire for the first time in living memory. In the warm afternoon, as white oxen are led to the altar garlanded with flowers, and flutists play a soothing melody, the Roman people look on with hope. Mothers hold up their babies to see the new Pater Patriae, father of the fatherland, Augustus, performing rites with humble gravitas. A gentle applause ripples as he completes the sacrifice and prays for the prosperity of Rome. The long republic had been tested to destruction, but from it, a new order arises, promising stability, renewed prosperity, and continuity. The sun sets over the city that evening, casting long shadows of Rome's 7 hills onto the plains. The fires of civil strife have been extinguished. In their place, the steady lamps of an imperial capital begin to glow. The Roman Empire, under Augustus's careful guidance, prepares to enter an era of unparalleled peace and splendor. The listener can almost feel the collective exhale of a world at peace after a long nightmare. And as the city of Rome drifts into slumber under the watchful stars, we too let go of the tensions of conflict, ready to journey into the calm night of an imperial age. Chapter 6: Augustus and the Dawn of the Empire. In the gentle pre-dawn light of 27 B.C., a new chapter unfolds for Rome. Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, now honored as Augustus, the illustrious, stands at the helm of a transformed state. Though only in his mid-30s, Augustus carries himself with a calm dignity and an almost fatherly presence. The Roman world, exhausted by decades of turmoil, gratefully yields to his steady hand. It is as if the Roman people, like a weary traveler, have finally found a safe harbor at sunrise. Augustus is keenly aware that Romans cherish their old republican ideals, so he shrouds his power in modest titles and traditional forms. He calls himself Princeps Civitatis, the first citizen, not a monarch, and stresses that he has restored the republic, even as everyone knows he oversees all. The Senate, in a grand gesture beneath its august bronze doors, grants him Maius Imperium, greater command, and tribunician power for life. They also grant him a new civic crown for saving citizens, and name the month of his greatest victories, August, in his honor. Yet Augustus famously refuses the diadem. He will not be called king. Instead, he rules by auctoritas, authority, and the genuine love of his people. Under Augustus, Rome blossoms like a well-tended garden in spring. He famously boasts, "I found Rome, a city of brick, and left it a city of marble." With peace now prevailing, construction and renewal are everywhere. Walking the city in this era, you would see temples repaired, basilicas built, and new public buildings arising. Augustus erects a magnificent altar of peace, Ara Pacis, dedicated to the goddess of peace, adorned with carvings of flowing vines, motherly goddesses, and a procession of Romans in serene unity. On a bright morning, artisans put finishing touches on its friezes, while families stop to admire them. The children pointing at the lifelike stone figures of priestesses and children, the parents smiling, knowing that this altar celebrates the blessed peace they now enjoy. The Forum of Augustus opens to the public, a grand new square flanked by colonnades and dominated by a towering temple to Mars the Avenger. Marble gleams white in the midday sun, and the space is decorated with statues of Rome's great men from the past. Romulus, the kings, famous consuls, creating a lineage that subtly culminates in Augustus himself. It's a visual narrative of Rome's destiny fulfilled. Citizens stroll there in the cool of the afternoon, marveling at how ordered and elegant their city has become. Augustus doesn't just build monuments, he rebuilds society's fabric. He passes laws to encourage marriage and childbearing among the elite, seeking to renew the moral standards of earlier times. He revitalizes religious festivals and priesthoods, so that on holy days, the city is alive with processions. Garlanded oxen led to sacrifice, flutes and lyres playing hymns, virginal maidens carrying baskets of offerings. Under the warm glow of summer lanterns, Augustus himself often leads these ceremonies, head veiled in reverence, reinforcing the bond between Rome's ruler and its gods. The people admire his piety. They whisper that as a youth he had been favored by Apollo, and indeed coinage shows him with Apollo's laurels. Beyond the city, Augustus secures the frontiers of the empire. His trusted generals complete the conquest of Spain and subdue the Alpine tribes, ensuring that the wild mountain winds no longer carry threat into Italy. To the east, he diplomatically recovers the lost legionary eagles from the Parthians without war, a tremendous coup carried out with subtle statecraft. In the north, the rivers Rhine and Danube become the demarcation of Roman rule in Europe. A sense of contentment and safety settles in the provinces. Roads are safer, piracy is gone from the seas, and commerce flows like never before. A traveller in these times might go from the hills of Tuscany to the bazaars of Syria, encountering the same Roman coins, the same laws, and feeling the same Pax Romana everywhere. The city of Rome itself, under Augustus, is at peace and reaches new heights of cultural achievement. Virgil, the poet, writes the Aeneid during this time, an epic weaving Rome's mythic founding with its contemporary ideals. In a dim study at dusk, Virgil recites to Augustus verses about Aeneas carrying his father out of burning Troy, an image resonant with Augustus's own role, carrying Rome out of the fires of civil war. Augustus listens with tears glinting in his eyes, moved by the destiny and responsibility the poem imparts. Livy writes his grand history of Rome, recording with love and care the tales of heroes past, as if to guide heroes present. Horace composes odes that celebrate the simple pleasures of countryside and friendship, as well as the glory of Rome under Augustus's guidance. It is a literary golden age, and one can imagine strolling by the portico of Livia on an evening, and hearing a group of youths enthusiastically discuss a line from Virgil or an epigram of Ovid, who cheekily writes of love and metamorphosis. Yet even this tranquil scene has its dark edges. Augustus's rule is benevolent, but it is absolute, and not everyone is content under the empire's new order. There are whispers in some senatorial circles, laments for lost libertas, liberty. However, having seen the chaos that unbridled liberty wrought, most Romans prefer the stability and prosperity of Augustus's reign. The occasional conspiracies against him are swiftly and quietly handled. The Praetorian Guard, his hand-picked household troops, their spears gleaming under the noonday sun during public ceremonies, serve as both protectors and a reminder that the peace has guardians. In AD 14, after a remarkable 45-year reign as princeps, Augustus dies peacefully at age 75, in his bed at Nola, with his wife Livia and family at his side. Rome plunges into sincere mourning. An entire generation has known no other ruler. They pay respects as his body lies in state, and they whisper that he ascended to the gods indeed. Soon, the Senate will officially deify him. In the Campus Martius, his ashes are placed in a grand mausoleum he had built years earlier, and the people file past with flowers and tears. In the sky above, the sun sets on the era of Augustus, but its golden afterglow lingers, promising that the calm night of the empire will continue. Augustus leaves behind an heir, Tiberius, and a system of governance that will endure. Though austere and melancholic, Tiberius is an experienced general and administrator who keeps the machine of state running. The transition of power is smooth, unlike the chaos after Caesar's death. The Roman Empire sails on, guided by the rudder Augustus set. As twilight deepens on Rome after Augustus's funeral, families light small oil lamps in their homes. Parents tell their children of the great man who brought peace, hoping the next rulers will honor his legacy. For now, the city rests secure, like a ship at anchor in a calm harbor, Augustus's star shining in the pantheon of the divine. The Pax Romana, 200 years of relative peace and prosperity, has begun in earnest. In this gentle nightfall of chapter 6, the listener can feel the contentment and stability that Augustus's era brought. The nightmares of civil war have faded, replaced by the gentle dream of peace. As the Roman world drifts to sleep under the watchful eyes of its first emperor's memory, so too do we allow ourselves to drift into a deeper state of calm, knowing that in the next chapters, the empire will reach even greater heights under both good and eccentric emperors. But that is a story to be told as the night goes on. Chapter 7: Emperors of the Early Empire, from Julio Claudians to the 5 good emperors. The gentle stability Augustus nurtured would be both a gift and a challenge to those who followed him. In the soft morning light, after Augustus's passing, Tiberius Caesar takes up the mantle of princeps. Tiberius is a tall, somber man in his mid-52s, with a lined face that rarely shows joy. He had been a successful general, securing Rome's frontiers in Germany and the Balkans. Now, as emperor, though the Romans still say princeps, Tiberius governs dutifully, if not affectionately. For the ordinary Roman, the early years of Tiberius's reign, A.D. 1437, continue much as under Augustus. The grain ships still arrive from Egypt on time, the legions still patrol the distant rivers, and the law courts function. If anything, Tiberius is economical. He refuses grand extravagances and leaves the treasury flush with surplus. We picture him in the afternoons on the Palatine, reading reports from provincial governors with furrowed brow, a cup of plain water at his side. He doesn't court popularity indeed. He withdraws more each year from the public eye. Eventually, he retires entirely to the Isle of Capri, letting administrative letters fly over the Bay of Naples like migratory birds back to the capital. In Capri's quiet coves and lemon groves, far from Rome's bustle, Tiberius spends his final years, leaving day-to-day rule to the capable, if ruthless, Praetorian prefect Sejanus, until Sejanus's own ambitions lead to his fall. Tiberius's reign ends without fanfare. He dies in A.D. 37, perhaps to the relief of a populace that found him distant and stern. Yet Rome remains stable and prosperous throughout his tenure, a testament to the enduring system Augustus built. Then comes Caligula, born Gaius but nicknamed Little Boot from his childhood in army camps. At first, Rome rejoices. Caligula, only 24, is charming, lively, and a great-grandson of Augustus by blood. When he ascends, people garland statues and rejoice as if a new golden age had dawned. Caligula declares games and amnesties. He parades at the Circus Maximus in a gleaming chariot, tossing coins to the crowd. But this bright beginning soon dims. After a severe illness or head fever just months into his rule, Caligula's behavior turns erratic and disturbing. The whispers in the marble halls speak of paranoia and caprice. He declares himself a living god, insisting his statue be placed in temples. By lamplight, he hosts extravagant banquets where, it's said, he might laugh one moment and rage the next. His beloved horse, Incitatus, is given a marble stall and rumoured to be slated as consul, a story likely exaggerated, but revealing how contemporaries saw his vanity. Caligula's reign, A.D. 3741, becomes a waking nightmare for the Senate and many close to power, as he spends wildly and even indulges in cruel games. Yet, to the common folk, he is still that generous young emperor who occasionally showers them with gifts. Eventually, after not quite 4 years, Caligula is assassinated by members of his own guard, cut down in a shadowy palace corridor after a theatrical performance. The city breathes a sigh of relief under the pale winter sun of AD 41. In the chaotic hours after Caligula's death, amidst alarm and confusion, the Praetorian guards stumble upon his uncle Claudius, cowering behind a curtain in the palace. Claudius is the last adult male of Augustus's line, and though he has a limp and a stammer, the soldiers impulsively hail him as emperor. What a surprising twist of fate for the scholarly Claudius. This mild, bookish man, in his 50s, often overlooked and ridiculed by his own family, suddenly wears the purple. We imagine Claudius on the first night of his reign, sitting in the imperial study surrounded by scrolls and flickering lamps, heart-pounding, yet also suffused with a quiet determination. He has studied Rome's history deeply. Indeed, he's writing its history, and now he has the chance to steer its present. Claudius ruled 4154 AD, turns out to be an able and conscientious ruler. Despite personal foibles and tragic misjudgments in his marriages, his last wife, Agrippina, being especially ambitious and ominous, Claudius focuses on governance. He extends Roman citizenship to more provincials, improves the bureaucracy by employing talented freedmen, former slaves, as palace secretaries, and undertakes great public works. Under a sunny sky, Claudius himself oversees the construction of a new harbour at Ostia to ensure Rome's grain supply, pointing and discussing plans with engineers as waves crash rhythmically in the distance. He also conquers Britain in AD 43, adding a new province to the empire, fulfilling what Julius Caesar had begun. The Romans celebrate with a grand triumph. Imagine Claudius returning to Rome in a chariot, somewhat awkward but proud, followed by British chieftains in chains and strange war chariots with blades on their wheels. The crowds cheer this unlikely emperor who achieved what none before had. There is a sense that under Claudius, reason and steadiness have returned. But alas, court intrigues, proliferate plots and poisonings, whisper through the imperial household. In AD 54, Claudius is believed to have been poisoned by Agrippina, eager to secure the throne for her son from a prior marriage, Nero. Thus dawns the reign of Nero, last of the Julio-Claudian line, AD 5468. Nero begins his rule at age 16 with promise. Guided by wise tutors like the Stoic philosopher Seneca, the young emperor initially presents a golden image. He ends secret trials, gives power to the Senate, and hosts lavish public games that delight the populace. In these early years, the people adore Nero for his youth, his chariot racing, and his patronage of the arts. He even performs on stage himself, singing and playing the lyre, scandalous to elites, but captivating to many commoners. However, as he grows older and sheds his advisors' influence, Nero's darker tendencies emerge. He becomes increasingly obsessed with his own artistic ambitions and personal pleasures, and intolerant of any opposition. Shadows gather in the imperial court. He orders the murder of his own mother, Agrippina. One night, their bitter argument ends with her sent away on a boat rigged to collapse. When she survives that, a more direct assassination follows. He divorces and reportedly executes his virtuous wife Octavia, making room for his mistress Poppaea. The wise Seneca retires, and Rome's governance starts to fray as Nero indulges in grandiose fantasies. Then, in A.D. 64, disaster strikes the capital, the Great Fire of Rome. For 6 days and nights in July's searing heat, flames devour the city. Imagine standing on the Aventine as a ferocious wind fans the inferno below. Temples, shops, and insulae collapsing in fiery cascades. The sky turned blood red at midnight. Panicked families flee, carrying what little they can, while others huddle in temples praying for deliverance. Nero, at his villa in Antium, upon hearing news of the fire, rushes back to coordinate relief. Contrary to later rumors, he did not fiddle while Rome burned. Violins didn't exist, though legend says he sang of the fall of Troy from a tower. In fact, Nero does organize shelter and food for the homeless, opening his gardens. But the fire destroys 2/3 of the city, leaving a charred landscape of smoking ruins and columns standing like blackened tree trunks in a winter forest. In the aftermath, seeking a scapegoat to quell rumors that he himself started the fire, some believed he wanted to clear land for a new palace. Nero points to a new religious sect, the Christians, still small and misunderstood. What follows is a grim episode, the first persecution of Christians. By torchlight in the imperial gardens, Christians are cruelly executed, some burned as human torches, others thrown to dogs, all to amuse a jaded crowd and deflect blame from Nero. It is a macabre carnival that casts a long moral shadow. Yet, from the ashes, Nero also builds. He seizes a large part of the ruined city to create his Domus Aurea, Golden House, a sprawling palace park of unheard-of luxury, with an artificial lake, gilded ceilings, and frescoed halls, where day and night seem to blend under jewel-like mosaics. At the entrance, a colossal statue of Nero, as the sun god towers, nearly 30 meters tall. The common people never see such splendor up close, but tales of its marvels spread, further alienating Nero from his subjects. He also redesigns Rome's street plan, making roads wider, building with brick and stone, and even implementing building codes. If done in a spirit of civic goodwill, these would be applauded. But rumors persist that he cleared the city for his own indulgence. Over time, Nero's rule becomes increasingly erratic and despotic. Senators and nobles are executed on suspicion of treason, including Seneca, forced to. Meanwhile, Nero indulges in artistic quests, competing in chariot races and musical contests in Greece, which he wins every time thanks to adoring or fearful judges. The empire's borders face threats, revolts in Britain and Judea, restlessness on the Rhine, but Nero seems more interested in perfecting his lyre performance or his next theatrical entrance. By AD 68, the weight of misrule triggers rebellions. Provincial governors and the legions they command rise in revolt. The Senate finally declares Nero a public enemy. Abandoned by the Praetorians and with the city turning against him, Nero flees Rome. At a quiet villa outside the city, as troops close in, Nero takes his own life with the help of a loyal freedman. His final words, captured by Suetonius, are poetically self-pitying. Qualis artifex pereo, what an artist dies in me. With Nero's death, the Julio-Claudian dynasty ends. The populace has mixed feelings. Some mourn the charismatic, the performer emperor who gave them grand games. Others rejoice that a tyrant is gone. For the first time, Rome faces the question, who will rule now? What follows is a tumultuous yet brief period known as the Year of the Four Emperors, AD 69. In one dizzying year, 4 different generals are proclaimed emperor by their armies: Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and Vespasian. Civil war looms. Battles are fought near Cremona in the north. But by the end of that year, clarity emerges as Vespasian, a tough, pragmatic general from the equestrian class, not the old nobility, secures the throne with the support of the Eastern legions and eventually the Senate. The army and people accept him. They crave stability over chaos. Thus begins the Flavian dynasty. Vespasian, ruled 69-79, is a breath of fresh air, grounded, witty, and competent. He had risen through merit, commanding legions in Germany and crushing the Jewish revolt in Judea, where his son Titus would capture Jerusalem in 70. A stocky man in his 60s, Vespasian famously has a farmer's work ethic and a dry humor. When a new tax on public latrines yields revenue, he holds a coin to his son's nose, saying, "Money does not stink." Under Vespasian, the imperial finances are restored by frugality and fair taxes. The Senate is treated with respect, but kept firmly out of military affairs, and Rome undertakes one of its most iconic construction projects, the Flavian Amphitheatre, better known as the Colosseum. Picture the Colosseum's construction site in A.D. 75. Thousands of slaves and craftsmen labor under the sun, erecting the travertine stone arches, while Vespasian occasionally strolls through with Titus, discussing progress. This huge amphitheatre, built on the drained lake of Nero's Golden House, is Vespasian's gift to the people, literally returning to them land Nero took for himself. In AD 80, after Vespasian's death, the Colosseum will be completed and inaugurated by Titus, with 100 days of games, where the people flock through its 80 entrances to watch gladiatorial combats and marvel at naval battles reenacted when the arena is flooded. For now, though, it rises steadily as a symbol that Rome's heart beats anew. Vespasian's decade-long rule is marked by stability and common sense. When he passes away peacefully in 7-9, famously joking, "Dear me, I think I'm becoming a god," as he felt death approach, poking fun at the deification of emperors, Romans feel they have lost a wise paterfamilias. But they have faith in his son and successor Titus, known for his generosity and gentle nature. Titus ruled 79-81, though his reign is short, wins the title Delight of the Human Race. As a general, he had a stern reputation. He led the brutal siege of Jerusalem, but as emperor he is epitome of justice and kindness. When Mount Vesuvius erupts in 79, burying Pompeii and Herculaneum in ashes and lava, Titus rushes aid to the survivors. The disaster is catastrophic. We see it through the eyes of Pliny the Younger, from across the Bay of Naples. A horrific cloud shaped like a pine tree's umbrella, the sky black at noon, tremors shaking the earth, and a rain of ash turning day to night. Thousands perish, their lives entombed in an instant. Titus, moved with compassion, uses imperial funds to compensate victims, and personally visits Campania to organize relief. The next year, when a fire in Rome blazes for 3 days and another plague hits, Titus again acts swiftly to support the populace. He waives all the usual palace ceremonies because, as he says, "I have lost a day," whenever he fails to do a kindness for someone. Perhaps Titus's most lasting contribution is opening the completed Colosseum in 80 with lavish spectacles. Imagine attending those inaugural games. The morning sunlight streaming through the Valerium, awning overhead, cheers echoing as gladiators salute Ave Caesar, Morituri te salutant, and exotic animals, lions, elephants, giraffes paraded and pitted in mock hunts. It is a grand festival, uniting Rome in shared excitement. Titus moves among the people easily, sharing in their awe. Alas, fate takes Titus too soon. He dies of fever, or perhaps poisoned by some rumors, in 81, after just 2 years. The throne passes to his younger brother Domitian, and the mood shifts. Domitian, ruled 81-96, is in his early 30s, hard-working and efficient like his father Vespasian, but also arrogant, reserved, and increasingly paranoid. Under his rule, the Flavian dynasty tilts towards autocracy. Domitian likes to be addressed as Dominus et Deus, Lord and God. In the palace, he sits for hours in a glittering audience hall, dispensing judgments personally, keeping tight control of the city's grain, the legion's loyalty, and the minutiae of administration. He's sternly moralistic in some ways, enforcing laws against immorality, and deeply invested in Rome's religious cults and traditions. We see him presiding over ceremonies with cold precision. He also campaigns on the frontiers, leading legions in person to victories, or at least to draws presented as victories, along the Danube against Dacian kings. Yet, Domitian's reign grows dark. Senators chafe at being marginalized, and at Domitian's treason trials, which eliminate any he suspects of disloyalty. Many in the elite live in silent fear, doing business under the weight of his gaze. The common people find him acceptable, he continues, providing entertainments and building projects, like a majestic new palace on the Palatine, and completing the temple of Jupiter Capitolinus after it burned down again. But a sense of oppression lies like a heavy dusk in aristocratic circles. In 96 A.D., Domitian's own courtiers assassinate him in a palace conspiracy. Fed up with his tyranny, the knife strokes in the dim corridors end the Flavian line, but restore some breath of relief in Rome's upper echelons. The Senate, recovering its voice, quickly elevates one of its elder statesmen as the new emperor, Nerva, a cautious, childless old gentleman. Nerva, ruled 96-98, is a transitional figure, chosen because he is inoffensive and well-respected. He promises to temper autocracy with cooperation. In the morning of his reign, one can almost feel a breeze of fresh air blow through the open windows of the Curia, as he confers with senators as partners rather than subordinates. Nerva's short rule sees the end of terror. Political prisoners are freed, and he institutes mild reforms like land distributions to the poor's children. But Nerva has no army backing and nearly loses control when the Praetorians demand the execution of Domitian's killers. Realizing the need for stability beyond his gentle rule, Nerva makes a wise and fateful decision. He adopts an heir based on merit, not blood. He chooses Trajan, an experienced, popular general commanding the armies in Germania. When Nerva passes in 98, the mantle peacefully transitions to this adopted son, ushering in the era of the 5 good emperors, as later historians call them. Trajan, ruled 98-117, is a towering figure, literally tall and robust, with a natural warmth. Born in Spain, he is the first non-Italian emperor, reflecting an empire now truly cosmopolitan. Rome rejoices at Trajan's accession. The new emperor walks among the people freely, greeting old soldiers by name, attending public games without heavy security. His reign is marked by an energetic optimism. Trajan expands the empire to its greatest territorial extent. He embarks on the Dacian Wars north of the Danube, and after fierce fighting in the Carpathian Mountains, 106, he conquers Dacia, modern Romania. We envision him on the lofty plain, accepting the surrender of King Decebalus amid the ruined Dacian capital of Samosegatusa. The spoils of these wars, tons of gold and silver mines, flow into Rome, funding grand monuments. Chief among them, Trajan's Forum and Column. The Forum of Trajan, inaugurated in 112, is the largest and most splendid of Rome's public squares. A massive basilica, libraries, and a grand open courtyard with a gleaming equestrian statue of Trajan. At its center stands Trajan's Column, 100 feet tall, wrapped in a spiral frieze depicting the Dacian campaigns in vivid detail. To this day, as we imagine ourselves in ancient Rome's times, you could wander into Trajan's Forum on a bright afternoon and see citizens craning their necks up at the column, marveling at the carved legions marching upward around it, like a marble tapestry telling the story of Rome's victory. Nearby, the adjacent markets of Trajan buzz with commerce, a multi-level complex of shops and offices, an architectural wonder that foreshadows a modern shopping mall. Trajan isn't only a conqueror, he's known as Optimus Princeps, the best ruler. He improves the welfare of the people, extends the Alimenta A program, started by Nerva, which provides low-interest loans to farmers and uses interest to support orphans and poor children. He builds roads, bridges, the Great Bridge over the Danube, and ports, always with an eye on improving communication and commerce across his vast dominion. When he sets out late in his reign to campaign in the east against Parthia, his conquests reach as far as the Persian Gulf. He even gazes reportedly at the sea, longing to go on to India, but age and illness hold him back. Trajan dies in 117, far from home, leaving the empire larger than ever but perhaps stretched thin. Still, Romans remember him as the ideal emperor for ages after. New rulers will be greeted by the Senate with the prayer, "May you be as fortunate as Augustus and as good as Trajan." Trajan leaves the empire to his adopted heir, Hadrian, another Spaniard, and his relative, who was a brilliant, cultured man in his early 42nds. Where Trajan was expansionist, Hadrian ruled 117-138, is consolidator. He wisely abandons the overextended recent conquests in Mesopotamia, drawing the borders back to more defensible lines. He is known for traveling constantly, a rarity for emperors, personally visiting almost every province. Picture Hadrian not in a palace, but on horseback or in a carriage, trailed by a modest entourage, appearing at a frontier fort in the misty morning. He inspects troops on the Rhine, discusses architecture in Athens, and hunts lions in North Africa. He wears Greek cloak when in Athens, a sign of his Philhellenism, love of Greek culture. In Britain, in AD 122, he orders the construction of a massive wall, cutting across the entire island Hadrian's Wall, to guard the northern limit of Roman Britain from barbarians. We imagine standing by Hadrian atop a windswept crag in Britannia's north, rain on our faces, as he outlines to engineers the wall's trajectory. 73 miles of stone and turf, with mile castles and forts where soldiers can keep watch under the grey skies. Hadrian also strengthens fortifications along the Danube and in North Africa, delineating the empire with clear lines. A lover of peace and the arts, Hadrian spends much time in the East, especially Greece and Egypt. In Athens, he completes the temple of Olympian Zeus and founds a new quarter of the city called Hadrianopolis. At night, he joins philosophical debates under the Stoa's lantern glow, championing Greek learning. He famously has a deep companionship with a beautiful youth, Antinous, who tragically drowns in the Nile. Heartbroken, Hadrian deifies Antinous, and cities across the east see statues of the boy appear, radiating divine youthfulness. In Egypt's twilight, he founds a city named Antinopolis at the site of his lover's death, ensuring memory transcends mortal life. Back in Rome, Hadrian leaves a permanent mark by rebuilding the Pantheon, originally erected under Augustus's Agrippa, but burned down. Completed around 125, the Pantheon is an architectural marvel, with its vast coffered dome and central oculus open to the sky. To walk into the Pantheon on a sunny day is to step into a sphere of light. The oculus projects a brilliant circle of sunlight that glides around the interior walls as the day passes. Marble of every hue, purple porphyry, yellow giallo antico, red Syrian stone adorns the floor and niches, and statues of the gods stand quietly in the apse. Hadrian intended it as a temple to all the gods, and indeed, inside one feels a cosmic harmony, as though standing at the center of the universe itself. It is said that when it rains, the raindrops through the oculus evaporate before reaching the floor, adding to the Pantheon's mystique. Under its great dome, perhaps Hadrian meditated on the heavens. We might imagine him on a late afternoon, alone in the Pantheon, watching a shaft of light drift across swirling marble, contemplating the unity of the Roman world and the divine. Hadrian also builds by himself a grand villa at Tivoli outside Rome, a retreat of gardens, libraries, baths, and recreated vistas of his travels, an Egyptian canal, a Greek theatre. It's a peaceful estate where we envision him in his final years, strolling under cypress trees with architects and scholars, planning one more Corinthian column here, a statue of Isis there, as cicadas hum in the olive groves. In A.D. 138, weary and ill, Hadrian ensures a smooth succession by adopting Antoninus Pius, stipulating that Antoninus in turn adopt a promising young man named Marcus Aurelius and another, Lucius Verus. Antoninus Pius ruled 138-161, presides over perhaps the most uneventful and prosperous era of the empire. Few major wars or crises erupt. The empire's height is maintained without new conquests or internal strife. Antoninus earns the title Pius for convincing the Senate to deify Hadrian, despite some opposition, and for his dutiful devotion to family and gods. His reign is like a long, pleasant summer afternoon where nothing particularly shocking occurs. A rarity in Roman history, the imperial treasury swells, aided by prudent management and lack of costly conflicts. The law is refined. The jurist, Salvius Julianus, systematizes edicts under Antoninus. One anecdote exemplifies Antoninus's character. When a minor city's building collapsed due to shoddy construction, he made the architect responsible pay for the damages, emphasizing accountability. The emperor spends much time at his family estate in Lorium, Etruria, governing serenely. Rome's population likely peaks around 1 million during this time, enjoying abundant grain, free entertainments, and relative employment. Public building continues, though no singular monument dominates Antonine Rome as Trajan's Column or the Pantheon did earlier. Perhaps the most notable thing about Antoninus Pius is the aura of calm and continuity. Under his long reign, 23 years, a child could grow to adulthood, never knowing imperial caprice or civil upheaval, a rare blessing in Roman times. But history is cyclical, and challenges return with the next generation. Marcus Aurelius ruled 180. The adopted grandson of Antoninus becomes emperor jointly at first with Lucius Verus, who dies of plague in 169. Marcus, known to posterity as the philosopher emperor, would have preferred a life of contemplation and writing. Trained in Stoic philosophy, Marcus Aurelius writes his meditations during his reign, a private journal of Stoic wisdom and self-admonition, jotted perhaps in military camps at night beside a flickering candle. Fate, however, demands that this gentle soul spend much of his reign at war. Almost immediately, the Eastern Parthian Empire strikes, 166, causing Marcus to send Lucius Verus to handle that war, which is ultimately successful. Roman legions reach Ctesiphon in Mesopotamia again. Returning soldiers unfortunately bring back a devastating plague, the Antonine Plague, likely smallpox, which ravages the empire's population for years. In the north, along the Danube, restless Germanic tribes, Marcomanni, Quadi, etc., sensing opportunity, breach the frontiers in massive incursions around 167. Marcus Aurelius spends the rest of his life leading campaigns in the forests and marshes of the Danubian frontier, pushing back and subduing these tribes. We picture Marcus Aurelius on a bleak winter dawn near the frozen Danube, clad in a general's cloak, addressing his legions with steady resolve. Under his command, the Romans fight grueling battles in wintry wastes and dense forests. Once, the miracle of the rain is said to have occurred. Surrounded and parched by the Quadi, a sudden thunderstorm allegedly sent by the prayers of an Egyptian legion or a Christian in the ranks, refreshed the Romans and scattered the enemy. Reliefs on Marcus's column, later erected in Rome, modelled on Trajan's show, a sky god raining down storm on the foes, a legendary divine intervention on behalf of this virtuous emperor. Marcus's generalship gradually stabilizes the frontier. Unlike Trajan's swift offensives, Marcus fights a defensive, attritional war, aiming to secure peace through strength. After years of conflict, he seems poised to add at least part of the enemy territory as new provinces, perhaps to be called Marcomannia, but the plan remains unfinished. Though often on campaign, Marcus Aurelius remains a careful and compassionate ruler. He sells palace treasures to fund war relief, tries to mitigate the plague's effects, and famously endows the education of orphans. The empire under him is strained but endures due to his leadership and the momentum of the good times before. In his rare moments in Rome, Marcus likely found solace in philosophy and family, strolling under the porticos of his villa on the Caelian, or writing late at night in his study. He mused on duty, virtue, and the transience of all things. How poignant are his own. We are like rocks tossed up from the earth. What does it matter if one falls sooner, another later? This reflection perhaps came in an evening of quiet thought, hearing distant laughter from a banquet, while he considered the burdens of power and the calm that philosophy granted him. In 180 A.D., Marcus Aurelius dies on campaign in his tent at Vindobona, Vienna, or Sirmium. His last breaths are presumably in the chill spring air, with tents flapping and the Danube's waters flowing as they had for millennia. His passing marks the end of the Pax Romana's golden line of good emperors. He had broken with tradition by making his son Commodus co-emperor before his death, hoping to ensure stability, thus reverting to a dynastic succession. History would judge that move unfortunate. Marcus's death transitions Rome from one of its most enlightened rulers to one of its most controversial, Commodus. But before we follow that path of decline, let us pause in this moment of Marcus's departure. The empire he guarded still stands mighty and unified. The city of Rome at dusk remains magnificent, filled with marble monuments, bustling forums, and contented citizens who perhaps do not yet realize that the best days, for now, are behind them. The statue of Marcus Aurelius on horseback, the very one now depicted in modern times on the Capitoline, uniquely surviving because medieval folk thought it was Constantine, likely stood in some imperial square, showing the philosopher emperor with arm outstretched, eternally calm. As twilight deepens, the people light their lamps in their insulae and villas, and life goes on. The Romans do not know the future. They live content in the present glories. We, however, as listeners, know the night must eventually deepen before a new dawn, and so we prepare to gently witness the empire's slow decline in the chapters to come, carrying with us the memory of Rome's peak splendor as a comforting glow against the darkness. Chapter 8. Life in the Imperial Roman World. Peaceful scenes from daily life. Sunlight spills over a quiet street in Pompeii, illuminating worn stone slabs and the delicate outlines of villas and shops. In this early hour, the city is just beginning to stir. You wander down the Via dell'Abbondanza, the main street, in the gentle warmth of morning. The air is fresh with a hint of the sea breeze from the Bay of Naples beyond, and all around you are signs of daily life ready to unfold. In the pre-dawn hush, Rome, too, lies peaceful. Imagine yourself awakening in a comfortable domus on the Esquiline Hill at daybreak. The sky glows rose and gold, and through the atrium's opening, you see a slice of that serene sky. The household is still quiet. A small fountain in the atrium trickles softly, its water catching the morning light. You rise and feel cool mosaic tiles under your feet. A pet sparrow twitters in the rafters. Somewhere distant, a rooster crows. The ancient Roman alarm clock. You breathe in the day's new air, faintly scented by the sweet aroma of bread already baking in nearby ovens. Stepping out into the street, you join the flow of Rome's awakening. Bakers' shops have been alight for hours. As you pass one, the door opens and a waft of warm, yeasty fragrance envelops you. Flat round loaves called panis emerge from the oven, stamped with the baker's mark. A smiling baker offers you a fresh piece. The crust is crisp and the inside steaming soft. With bread in hand you continue on, nibbling contentedly. At a corner, a milkman clanks by, leading a goat whose udders are bulging with the morning's yield. He measures a cup of goat's milk for a mother and her child at their doorway. In another doorway, an oil lamp seller is trimming wicks on yesterday's returned lamps and refilling them with olive oil for resale, his shop fragrant with the fruity scent of pressed olives. As the sun rises higher, gilding the city's terracotta rooftops, the streets grow livelier. Merchants push handcarts laden with fruits, vegetables from the countryside, purple figs, green grapes, heaps of olives, and baskets of lemons and apples. The market at the Forum booms with chatter. Vendors call out their wares in musical Latin: Pisces, Piscium, Recentium, fish, fresh from the Tiber and the coasts. There are aromas of spices, pepper, cumin, and coriander from the east, mingling with the briny scent of fish and the sweetness of ripe peaches. Customers haggle cheerfully. A matron runs her fingers over a bolt of Egyptian linen at a cloth stall while negotiating a price, the fabric soft and cool to her touch. Nearby, an elderly farmer from a Sabine hill town stands beside baskets of chicory and artichokes, his sandals dusty, a friendly toothless grin on his face as he measures out leafy greens for a tavern keeper's kitchen. All around you swirl the sounds of life, donkeys braying, coins clinking, traders bantering, children laughing as they chase each other around a statue of Mercury at the peg market's edge. Yet even this bustle has a gentle rhythm. Centuries of routine have made the chaos of commerce feel like a well-practiced performance. Leaving the busy market, you wander into a residential neighborhood. Above, laundry lines stretch between insulae balconies, tunics and togas fluttering like flags. A couple of caged doves coo soothingly from a windowsill. You pass a thermopolium, a warm food shop, where an attendant is stirring a pot of lentil stew on a brazier. The savory smell of herbs and garlic drifts out, and you realize it's nearly midday. Midday in Rome means a pause in the city's intensity. The sun now shines high and bright, and the white limestone of temples and basilicas almost glitters. People seek shade and rest. Many shops close for a few hours. It's time for the midday meal and siesta. You follow a small crowd drifting towards the public baths, a cornerstone of Roman daily life. As you approach the baths of Caracalla, one of the Carths, the grandest thermae in Rome, you admire its immense brick arches and verdant gardens surrounding it. Orange trees and oleanders line the path, their blossoms perfuming the warm air. Inside the baths, the atmosphere is one of relaxed vitality. The entrance hall opens to a vast palestra, exercise ground, where some youths and men are gently exercising, tossing a weighted ball, wrestling playfully, or doing stretches. Their laughter is light, echoing off the portico's columns. You disrobe in the apoditerium, changing room, tucking your clothing into a secure niche, watched over, for a small tip, by an attendant. Clad in just a simple bathing wrap, you step into the tepidarium, the warm bath chamber. Here, warm stone benches line the walls. You feel the heat radiating from under the mosaic floor. The hypocaust beneath carries hot air, warming the room like a gentle sauna. The air is humid and fragrant with scented oil. Bathers recline against the smooth, warm marble, eyes half closed, in conversation or quietude. You glide into a shallow, warm pool. The water embraces you at blood temperature, soothing muscles pleasantly tired from walking. All around, you hear content murmurs and the soft splashes of water. A friend floats over to greet you. Together you lazily discuss nothing in particular, perhaps the new comedy play in the theatre of Marcellus or yesterday's chariot race results, voices hushed by the steamy calm. After soaking, you move next to the caldarium, the hot bath. Steam greets you as an attendant swings open a bronze door. Inside, the heat wraps around you like a thick blanket. Under a lofty dome, sunlight streams through small high windows, illuminating swirling mist. The hot plunge pool beckons. You dip in quickly, skin tingling at the intensity. Nearby, a few older men sit on the edge, chatting in low tones, while pouring hot water over their shoulders with bronze ladles. You take a moment to simply be, inhaling deeply. Your pores open, cares melt away. From a corner, you catch a whiff of eucalyptus and pine. Someone must have sprinkled aromatic oils on the brazier coals. You lean against the pool's edge, closing your eyes, water up to your chin, and for a moment, time ceases to exist. Emerging from the caldarium, cheeks flushed and body thoroughly heated, you pass through the tepidarium again and head to the frigidarium, the cool pool. You take the plunge. The cold water is shocking yet invigorating. Every nerve in your body awakens. Around you, others gasp and laugh at the chill. A couple of youths even playfully splash each other, yelping at the cold. When you climb out, the air feels crisp and your skin alive. An attendant offers you a freshly laundered linen towel. You wrap it around yourself, enjoying the sensation of being clean, refreshed, reborn. Before leaving, you indulge in a brief massage. In a side room, a skilled masseur rubs you down with perfumed oil of lavender and bergamot. His strong hands scrape the oil and sweat away with a small, curved strigil, leaving your skin glowing. He kneads any knots from your shoulders and feet. You surrender to the pleasure of touch, muscles soft as dough. Finally, dressed again and stepping out of the baths, you feel marvelously renewed, mind clear, body relaxed. The afternoon sun outside is gentler now, as day edges toward evening. You stroll through the bath's attached gardens, where roses and laurels grow along pathways. Bees hum around blossoms, and marble statues of Asclepius and Hygeia, gods of health, stand watching over this oasis of well-being. You think to yourself that no matter the troubles of the world, places like this provide a slice of true contentment in the present moment. You decide to walk next to the heart of the city, the Roman Forum, to see it at the magical hour of dusk, that time when the marble columns and old stones seem to hold the day's warmth and stories. The streets you take are lively again after the midday lull. Artisans have reopened their workshops. You pass a cobbler carefully cutting leather for new sandals by lamplight, whistling a tune. A group of children skip by, likely just done with their lessons, giggling and kicking a ball of rags. One calls out an affectionate "Salve," "Hello" to you, and you wave back with a smile. As you near the Forum, the energy of Rome's social and political core embraces you. But now, in the twilight, it's a more tranquil energy than the morning market frenzy. Many have finished their business and come to the Forum not to work, but to stroll, chat, and observe. Torchlights and oil lamps are being lit one by attendants on tall poles, their flames flickering to life as the sky shifts from blue to lavender. Walking onto the Forum's ancient paving stones, you admire the panorama, majestic temples on all sides. To your left looms the Temple of Saturn, its 8 columns now silhouetted against the dusky sky, looking like solemn guardians. Straight ahead, the column of Trajan is visible beyond the Forum, and nearby the Colosseum's upper arches catch the last sunlight, a golden halo around its silhouette. But the most arresting sight is the Temple of Castor and Pollux. To your right, its trio of tall white columns rising proudly, the evening star just visible above them. In the open plaza, some orators are still debating under the rostra, though their crowds are sparse and their voices soft. You choose a seat on the steps of the Basilica Julia, warm from the day's sun, and simply observe. Senators in their white togas with a broad purple stripe exit the Curia, Julia, Senate House in small clusters, wrapping up their sessions. They linger to gossip under the colonnades, their words indistinct, but their camaraderie clear as they nod and gesture. Across the way, under the arch of Septimius Severus, a trio of street musicians sets up. A flute, a lyre, and a small drum. They begin, a gentle melody, something nostalgic, maybe an old folk tune of the Italian countryside. The notes float through the forum like a caress. Passers-by slow their steps to listen. A few couples, perhaps courting youths, use the music as an excuse to stand a bit closer in the shadows of a column, whispering sweetly. As the music plays, your eyes wander to the Senate House porch, where braziers are lit, emitting a soft glow. And here, you catch a scene that feels almost sacred. The distant murmurs of senators beneath torchlight. A meeting has run late, a rare twilight session. Through the open bronze doors of the Curia, you can see the senators inside still seated on their benches, flickering torches mounted on the walls as their only illumination. Their figures are mostly silhouettes, and their voices merge into a collective murmur, rising and falling in measured argument. Perhaps they debate some important matter of state, grain provisions, or a new aqueduct funding. But, from this distance, it is just a hum, dignified and secretive. A few late working clerks wait outside with scrolls, and a pair of lictors, the magistrate's guards with rods, stand by the door, their fasces staffs catching the torchlight with a dull shine. It strikes you that these murmurs under torchlight have been heard for centuries, generation after generation of Rome's leaders, discussing, deciding, steering the ship of empire, while ordinary people like you observe and trust in their governance. The continuity is comforting. Darkness deepens to true night. The nearly full moon rises above the eastern hills, silvering the columns and pediments. Many folks have left the forum now, off to home or tavern. You stand and stretch, feeling pleasantly tired and at peace. The musicians have finished and are packing up, smiling at the few coins they earned. The senators too adjourn. They spill out of the Curia with a few final remarks and then disperse, their footfalls echoing on the paved stone. You exit the forum through the Arch of Titus, whose reliefs of the Jewish war trophies faintly glint in the moonlight. Your path home takes you by the Colosseum. Its grand arches are illuminated by torches placed at intervals, golden light dancing on the ancient travertine. All is quiet there now. The roar of the crowd, just a memory that lingers in the stones. You step inside the periphery through an open gate. A kindly guard, recognizing a peaceful wanderer, allows you a brief look. In the vast dark arena, you stand at the podium level. The seating tiers above are shadowy, like a mountain at night. Overhead, the stars glitter through the open oculus of the sky. You can almost hear ghosts of cheers and the clash of arms from earlier in the day. But right now, the amphitheater rests. A sleeping giant, perhaps a stray cat, scampers across the sand below, chasing a mouse. But aside from that tiny life, it's serene. You imagine it won't awaken until tomorrow's games. For now, it's yours. A colossal cradle of silence and history cradling you under the cosmos. Resuming your journey, you pass through a residential alley. Many windows still glow with lamplight. You catch snippets of domestic scenes. A father telling a bedtime Hercules story to a drowsy child. Two sisters quietly sewing by lamp, heads bent together as they discuss the day. The tantalizing smell of spiced lentils, wafting from a late supper someone is cooking. From an upper floor comes the soft strum of a lyre, someone practicing a lullaby, or simply soothing themselves at day's end. Arriving at your own doorway, you push aside the curtain and enter your candlelit atrium. The household slaves have retired. It's peaceful. On your table, a small bronze oil lamp flickers, depicting on its surface a laughing satyr, a bit of mirthful art to ward off the dark. You pour yourself a cup of watered wine, its sweet aroma rising, stepping into the garden peristyle at the back of the house. You drink slowly and gaze at the night sky. The garden is tiny but lush. A fig tree, a few rose bushes, some herbs. In the corner, water from a little fountain trickles over a statue of a reclining river god, a gentle music to accompany your thoughts. You feel the coolness of the marble bench beneath you as you sit and let the tranquil moment embrace you. High above, the Milky Way stretches like a gauzy ribbon. Romans call it the Road of the Gods. On such a clear night, you make out constellations, Jupiter's stars, Hercules, maybe Saturn if it's that time of year. Somewhere out there, beyond mortal reach, you imagine the gods lightly tread, looking down kindly on their city. A shooting star suddenly streaks across the blackness. You make a quick wish, a secret hope for tomorrow, perhaps love or fortune, and smile to yourself. From afar, just barely carried on the breeze, you hear the distant rumble of a chariot on cobblestones, likely a courier or a late traveler arriving before the city gates close. An owl hoots from a rooftop nearby, answered by another in the distance. Their hollow calls create a soothing nocturnal dialogue. You finish your wine. The events of the day flit through your mind. The lively market, the soothing baths, the golden forum at dusk, the silent Colosseum. Each memory a jewel, polished and glowing. You feel grateful to have experienced these ordinary yet precious parts of Roman life. Here, in the largest city on earth, capital of a vast empire, life is rich and full, but also reassuringly routine. People laugh, love, eat, and pray under these same stars, just as they did generations before and will for generations after. Your oil lamp inside sputters a little. It's running low, signaling that it's time to rest. You stand, giving one last stretch and sigh of contentment. As you slip inside, you notice the painting on your wall by the lamplight. It's of Venus rising from the sea, attended by playful, Cupid figures. Her serene half-smile seems to bless the room with calm and beauty. You silently thank the household gods, Lares, at their little shrine by the door, as is your habit, for a peaceful day. Then you retire to your bed, the linen cool on your skin, and close your eyes. Outside your window, Rome continues to sleep and dream. The Forum's statues stand vigil in the moonlight. The Tiber reflects the stars. The city walls guard tens of thousands of quiet homes like yours. In Pompeii, where we began our stroll, the moonlit streets lie empty and silent, the aroma of sun-warmed stone lingering. The empire at peace drapes like a warm blanket over the world. In this gentle stability, you, like millions of others from Britannia to Egypt, from Gaul to Syria, surrender to the night's embrace, knowing that tomorrow will bring another day of simple joys and familiar routines in the eternal city and beyond. Chapter 9. Challenges and Changes. Crisis and Recovery in the 3rd century. The Roman Empire, like a living being, has its cycles of vigor and fatigue. As we depart the serene scenes of daily life and return to the grand narrative of history, the tone shifts. The 2nd century's golden glow fades into the more troubled atmosphere of the 3rd century. It is as though we watch a long summer day give way to an unsettled twilight. Still, we recount these events calmly, as one describing distant thunder from the safety of a shelter, aware that all storms pass eventually. When Marcus Aurelius died in AD 180, and his son Commodus came to power. It was as if a crack appeared in the mighty edifice of the Pax Romana. Commodus, who co-ruled since 177 and ruled alone 180, 192, was a young man more interested in personal glory and pleasure than statecraft. We see him in rich attire, imagining himself the new Hercules, even fighting as a gladiator in the arena, though with wooden swords against handicapped opponents. While the people at first loved the spectacle of an emperor in the Colosseum, the wiser among them felt unease. Under Commodus, the empire's steady governance faltered. He left the frontier armies to their own devices and spent lavishly on games and self-aggrandizement. Corrupt favorites, like the Praetorian prefect Perennis and later the chamberlain Cleander, effectively sold public offices to the highest bidders. Famine hit Rome in 190 after grain shortages, leading to riots. Cleander was torn apart by an angry mob, an incident that would have been unthinkable under earlier emperors. The city's mood soured. By A.D. 192, Commodus's erratic behavior, he renamed all months after himself, and the legions, the Senate, even Rome itself, in his own honor and cruelties, alienated the elites, and even those close to him. On New Year's Eve of 192, he was assassinated, strangled in his bath by a wrestler named Narcissus, part of a palace plot, and so ended the Antonine dynasty. What followed is a rapid, dizzying sequence. The Roman world plunged into civil strife as ambitious generals vied for power in what became known as the Year of Five Emperors, 193. In a matter of months, the purple passed from Pertinax, an upright elderly senator who tried to reform but was murdered by unruly Praetorians after 86 days, to Didius Julianus, who bought the throne in an auction by the Praetorian Guard, bidding highest for the imperial honor, a deeply shameful episode. But his rule in Rome was tenuous, as the legions in the provinces refused to accept a bought emperor. 3 powerful governors declared themselves emperor with their armies: Pescennius Niger in Syria, Clodius Albinus in Britain, and Septimius Severus in the Danube region. It is as if the great imperial ship suddenly had multiple would-be captains steering in different directions. However, one emerged dominant. Septimius Severus, a tough, shrewd general from North Africa, marched swiftly on Rome, eliminated Didius Julianus. The Senate, fed up, welcomed Severus and executed Julianus after just 66 days of rule, then defeated Niger in the east and Albinus in Gaul by 197. By AD 197, Severus stands as sole emperor, restoring some order. Under Septimius, Severus ruled 193-211. We feel the empire take on a more militarized tone. Severus distrusts the Senate, having overcome senatorial-supported rivals, and leans on the army as his base of power. Be harmonious, enrich the soldiers, and scorn all others. He is said to have advised his sons, a telling indication of his priorities. He increases soldiers' pay, permits them to marry, connecting them more to local communities, and fills high offices with his loyal men, often equestrian or provincial, rather than old Roman aristocracy. This is a shift. The Senate's influence wanes while the army's influence waxes. We see Severus, a stern, bearded figure, issuing decrees in military camps. His 2 young sons, Caracalla and Geta at his side, learning the art of ruling by command. Severus campaigns much. He strengthens the limes, frontiers, in North Africa, even ventures to Britain in his later years, where he fights Caledonian tribes beyond Hadrian's Wall, pushing the frontier briefly to the Antonine Wall, though the terrain and guerrilla tactics exhaust his legions. In Eboracum, in Britain, under the grey skies and drizzle, Severus dies in 211, telling his sons to get along, enrich the soldiers. But tragically, his own family doesn't heed the first part. His elder son Caracalla quickly murders the younger Geta in their mother's arms in Rome during a feud in 212, reportedly staining the room's marble with fraternal blood. Caracalla ruled 211-217, becomes sole emperor, brutal, paranoid, yet oddly visionary in some ways. He issues the famous Constitutio Antoniniana in 212, granting Roman citizenship to virtually all free inhabitants of the empire. We imagine heralds reading this edict in forums from Spain to Syria. Many rejoice, feeling more integrated and proud to be cives Romani, though some senators grumble that citizenship has been cheapened. One reason Caracalla did it was to broaden the tax base, since citizens paid certain taxes. Caracalla's reign, however, is mostly remembered for cruelty and debauchery. He deals harshly with any perceived opposition. The memory of his brother's murder haunts him, perhaps making him more vicious. He is also enamored with Alexander the Great, aping his style and even Macedonian dress. He leads a massive campaign against the Parthian Empire in the east, with some success initially, but in 217, while relieving himself by a roadside during a campaign, some say near Carrhae, he is assassinated by one of his own guards, likely at the instigation of the Praetorian prefect Macrinus. The Severan dynasty wobbles. Macrinus rules only a year, the first emperor from the equestrian order, not senatorial, showing the trend, before Severus's extended family rallies around the youth, Elagabalus, a distant cousin, great-nephew of Severus's wife Julia Domna, and a Syrian priest of the sun god, who takes power in 218. What follows is an era of eccentric chaos in the imperial court. Elagabalus, 218-222, is only 14 when proclaimed emperor, flamboyant and obsessed with the sun god El-Gabal from Emesa, hence his nickname. He introduces exotic Eastern religious practices to Rome, marrying a Vestal virgin in a scandalous union, parading his black meteorite stone of El-Gabal through the streets, and making Elagabal, Sol Invictus, head of the Roman pantheon above Jupiter. By night, stories say, he danced in robes as the sun's high priest, indulged in all manner of sexual and gender-bending behaviors. Some accounts suggest he identified as female and sought transition in modern terms. The Roman populace and praetorians grow weary of these outrages and his neglect of state affairs. In 222, they murder the 8-year-old Elagabalus and his bite mother, dumping their bodies in the Tiber. His young cousin Severus Alexander, 222-235, is made emperor, guided by his grandmother, Julia Maesa, the true power, and mother Julia Mamaea. Alexander is mild and well-intentioned, but times are changing fast. During Alexander's reign, storm clouds gather on the frontiers. A new power rises in the east, the Sassanid Persian Empire under Ardashir, replacing the old Parthians and proving far more aggressive. In 232, Severus Alexander campaigns against the Persians, with mixed results. Meanwhile, on the Rhine-Danube, Germanic tribes, Alemanni, Goths, etc., press more strongly than before. In 234, as these pressures mount, Alexander, trying diplomacy and bribes, loses favor with his legions who see it as weakness. In 235, at Mogontiacum, Mainz on the Rhine, Alexander is assassinated by his own soldiers, along with his mother, ending the Severan line. What follows is nothing short of anarchy, a rapid succession of barracks, emperors propped up by armies across the empire. Between 235 and 284, more than 20 emperors officially ruled, and many more usurpers claimed power. It's a dark, frenetic time, like a rough sea storm. The empire is beset by invasions. Goths ravage the Balkans and even Greece. Franks and Alemanni breach Gaul and Spain. The Persian king Shapur captures a Roman emperor, Valerian, in 260, who ends his days humiliated as Shapur's footstool. Plagues the plague of Cyprian C. 249-262 decimates populations anew. Economic depression, debased currency leads to inflation. A denarius that once was pure silver now is a tiny wash of silver over base metal, hardly worth anything. In the provinces, rebel realms break off. The Gallic Empire in the west, 260-274, and the Palmyrene Empire in the east, led by Queen Zenobia, 267-272, operate semi-independently, fragmenting unity. Yet even amid this chaos, there are flickers of resilient leadership. Emperor Decius, 249-251, tries to restore traditional Roman piety, tragically known for initiating the first empire-wide persecution of Christians, requiring sacrifices to the Roman gods. Decius perishes fighting the Goths, but the invasions are temporarily checked. Emperor Gallienus, 253-268, despite losing his father Valerian to the Persians and seeing the empire split, manages to defend Italy and Greece against Goths and contain some usurpers. He even fosters a renaissance in philosophy and arts at his court, like a candle in the dark. Gallienus also reforms the military, creating a mobile cavalry reserve. Eventually, strong rulers emerge to pull Rome from this crisis of the 3rd century. In 268, Claudius Gothicus takes power and earns his name by crushing a huge Gothic invasion at the Battle of Naissus in Serbia, a significant victory that gives breathing space. He unfortunately dies of plague in 270, but his successor, Aurelian, 270-275, goes on a whirlwind campaign to reunify the empire. We see Aurelian, tough and no nonsense. His soldiers called him Manu ad Ferrum, hand on hilt, because he was ever ready to draw sword, riding hard with his cavalry. He defeats the Alemanni and Juthungi, who had reached even Italy, earning the title Restituta Orbis, Restorer of the World, then marches east and crushes Zenobia's Palmyrene Empire, capturing the proud queen who, legend says, is paraded in golden chains in a Roman triumph, but is later treated generously and given a villa in Italy to live out her days. He then turns west and recovers Gaul from the breakaway Gallic Empire. By 274, the empire is whole again under Aurelian's command. To strengthen defenses, Aurelian builds a new set of robust city walls. Around Rome, the Aurelian walls, many sections of which still stand, a sign of the times as the eternal city's safety could no longer be taken for granted against barbarian incursions. These walls, some 19 kilometers circuit, enclose the 7 hills and Campus Martius, their gates stout and towers high, giving Romans a sense of security as they watch masons at work in the daylight and patrols pace atop them at night. Aurelian is hailed as restorer of the world. What a turnaround from just years prior when it seemed the world was falling apart. Alas, he is assassinated by some officers, misled by a false rumor of his harshness. Stability wavers again with short reigns until Diocletian, 284-305, another soldier emperor, who finally brings deep reforms and a new order. Diocletian, coming from the Balkans, realizes the empire has grown too vast and complex for one man to govern in these dangerous times. So he establishes the tetrarchy, rule of 4. He takes a co-emperor, Maximian, and 2 junior Caesars, Galerius and Constantius, dividing responsibility between East and West. This brings efficient regional response to threats. Imagine official ceremonies in 293, where statues of the 4 emperors are set up, all wearing the same purplish imperial garb, symbolizing unity of purpose. People may puzzle at having multiple rulers, but they soon see fewer usurpers and more consistent defense. Diocletian also imposes stringent economic controls, edicts on maximum prices, an attempt to curb inflation, though largely unsuccessful, and reforms the coinage by introducing new, more stable coins, like the gold solidus eventually. He reorganizes provinces into smaller units and separated civil and military authority to curb overmighty generals. One could picture Diocletian at his capital in Nicomedia. He ruled the East, going over maps by lamplight, drawing lines that carve old provinces into new dioceses, a term from his name, intending more manageable governance. Perhaps he uses colored inks on parchment as he conceptualizes Italy being just one part of a larger unit, rather than the core of the world, a revolutionary mindset shift. Diocletian, also known for his autocratic style, draped himself in a truly royal fount, Aura the first to openly claim the title Dominus, Lord, and have people prostrate themselves in his presence, reflecting Eastern royal customs. For common folk, this might distance the emperor, but it also heightens the mystique. The emperor is not just the first citizen, he is almost a semi-divine monarch whose will can shape destiny. A more ominous part of Diocletian's legacy is the great persecution of Christians, 303-311, the harshest attempt to enforce traditional religion by wiping out the now large and widespread Christian community. Edicts are issued to burn churches, imprison clergy, and compel sacrifice to the Roman gods upon pain of death. In Nicomedia, we imagine Diocletian and Galerius standing on a palace balcony on an early morning in 303, watching as soldiers tear down the local church, cast scriptures into bonfires, and drag defiant faithful to prison. Perhaps thunder rumbles, as legend says. Lightning struck Diocletian's palace during one edict. Enforcement. This is a grim time for Christian minorities. Many martyrs like St. George, St. Lucy, and others meet their fate with serene faith according to later hagiographies. But ironically, rather than destroy Christianity, the persecution seems to strengthen the resolve of its adherents and earn them admiration for their courage. This final violent convulsion of the old pagan state against the new faith will soon give way to a dramatic reversal. Diocletian, aging and ill, does something unprecedented in 305. he voluntarily abdicates, urging Maximian to do so as well. We see a ceremonial day where Diocletian, at his palace in Nicomedia, formally removes the purple cloak and diadem and hands them to the next designated Augustus. Then he retires to his beloved palace at Spalatum, in Dalmatia, a massive seaside villa fortress of white stone. There, he famously tends his vegetable gardens in contentment. When asked by a letter if he'd consider returning to power, amidst later chaos, he replies that, if they saw the cabbages he planted growing, they wouldn't ask such a thing. A gentle yet firm refusal. How calming to picture this once all-powerful emperor in a straw hat under the Dalmatian sun, pruning cabbages and reflecting on the impermanence of power. The 3rd century's crises, we realize, were intense but ultimately weathered. Through all these upheavals, wars, plagues, economic collapse, the core idea of Rome persisted. Cities still functioned, farms still yielded, Latin and Greek culture still thrived quietly in homes and schools, even if headlines were full of drama. The Roman people, resilient as ever, adapted to new normals under soldier emperors, saw their armies become filled more with provincials. Their emperors hail from far-flung places. The empire changed shape but did not break. By the time the 4th century dawns, thanks to leaders like Aurelian and Diocletian, there is a sense of renewed stability and a leaner, more militarized but functioning state. Let us pause and absorb a tranquil scene as a contrast to the foregoing turbulence. Imagine around 300 A.D., a veteran farmer in Gaul, ploughing his field at dusk. He's seen it all. He remembers panic when a usurper ruled Gaul, then relief when Aurelian restored unity. He heard distant rumors of battles and strange new religions, but through it all, each season he has sown and reaped. Now, the Roman state, though altered, still protects his farm from raiders. On the horizon stands a milestone bearing Diocletian's name, indicating restored roads. He wipes his brow, unyokes his oxen, and heads home as stars blink into the sky. His children run to greet him, chattering in vernacular Latin about their day. They know little of crises. They know their father served in the legions under Probus, one of the better 3rd C emperors who revitalized Gaul's viticulture. They know the tax collector comes reliably for grain, and that markets still sell olive, oil, glassware, and pottery as they did in their grandfather's time. Life goes on. Thus, even in crisis, the thread of ordinary life remained unbroken. It is a comforting realization. The Roman world had an incredible capacity to endure. The worst storms passed, and with the new century came not just stability, but profound transformation. As we shall soon see, the chapters of the 4th and 5th centuries will bring a different kind of Rome, one that is Christian and administratively divided, yet still Roman in its essence. So, we conclude chapter 9 with a gentle exhale, knowing that though darkness encroached on the empire's zenith, the dawn of renewal was already peeking over the horizon. The empire and its people, scarred but alive, are ready for a new morning. Chapter 10. Constantine and the Late Empire. A new faith and a new capital. The early 4th century ushers in dramatic changes that reshape the Roman world's soul and center. It is a time when, amid the empire's stabilized frontiers and reformed institutions, a spiritual revolution takes hold, and a new guiding star emerges in the person of Constantine the Great. Picture a cool evening in October of AD 312 on the outskirts of Rome. by the Milvian Bridge over the Tiber. Two rival emperors, Constantine and Maxentius, prepare for battle at dawn. Constantine, the Western Augustus, declared by his troops 6 years earlier in Britain, has marched from Gaul to challenge Maxentius, the self-proclaimed ruler of Italy and son of the former emperor Maximian. The air is tense. Constantine gazes at the night sky, perhaps in silent prayer or contemplation. According to sources, on the eve of the battle, Constantine experiences a vision. He sees a symbol in the sky. Some say a cross of light, or the Chi Rho, the monogram of Christ, with the words, "In hoc, signo vinces." In this sign, you will conquer. Imagine his wonder and resolve at this sight. That night, he reportedly instructs his soldiers to paint the Chi Rho on their shields, embracing the Christian God's protection. Next morning, October 28, 312, as the mist rises from the Tiber, the Battle of the Milvian Bridge unfolds. Constantine's forces clash fiercely with Maxentius's larger army. We can envision Constantine, wearing a gilded helmet marked now not with a pagan emblem, but with the Christian labarum, riding along the ranks, shouting encouragement. Maxentius's troops are eventually pushed back onto the Milvian Bridge, which collapses under the weight and panic. Maxentius himself drowns in the Tiber's currents. By sunset, Constantine stands as the victor at Rome's gates. The city welcomes him as a liberator. After years of tyranny under Maxentius, the people open their gates with cheers. Constantine enters Rome in triumph, oddly not offering sacrifices to Jupiter Capitolinus as tradition demanded, but likely attributing his success to the god of the Christians. Thus begins Constantine's reign as sole ruler in the West, and soon of the entire empire. He promptly ends official persecution of Christians with the Edict of Milan in 313, jointly issued with the Eastern Emperor Licinius, granting religious toleration to Christians and all faiths. One can imagine the joy among Christian communities. In Rome, they emerge from catacombs and house churches into the light, able now to worship openly. Constantine even restores confiscated church property. This marks a momentous turn. The empire that once threw Christians to lions now protects them. The populace at large might have been surprised, but not displeased. Many had already converted quietly, and others, though traditional, saw value in unity and Constantine's favor from this powerful new god. Over the next decade, Constantine consolidates power. By 324, after further civil wars, he defeats Licinius after some back-and-forth hostilities and a breakdown in relations, and becomes the sole emperor of a reunified Roman Empire. That final battle, at Chrysopolis, is also under the banner of the cross. Licinius is spared initially, but later executed. Thus, Constantine stands unchallenged. With unity achieved, Constantine transforms the empire in ways as profound as Augustus did 3 centuries before. He has a grand vision to strengthen the empire's cohesion and align it with the Christian faith. Finding the old pagan aristocracy of Rome somewhat resistant, and the city itself strategically less ideal, being far from the frontier action, Constantine decides to build a new capital in the east, where he had campaigned for years, and which was more central to the now richest and most threatened provinces. In A.D. 324, he chooses the site of ancient Byzantium on the Bosporus, a Greek city with superb strategic location, straddling Europe and Asia, controlling the waterways between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. With great ceremony, He refounds it as Constantinople, the city of Constantine. We picture the construction, armies of workers expanding walls, erecting forums, palaces, baths, and churches. Constantine imports treasures and art from all over, statues from Greece, Egyptian obelisks, Italian sculptures, to adorn his new city. By 330, Constantinople is inaugurated as the new imperial residence. It's often dubbed Nova Roma, New Rome, but in fact, it becomes more than a second Rome. It will thrive and outlast the old one. This founding of Constantinople feels like a calm, auspicious event after stormy times. On Inauguration Day, Constantine himself, dressed in ceremonial imperial robes, glinting with gold, likely leads a procession through the new Senate House, down the main colonnaded avenue to the central forum, where a monumental column stands later, topped by a statue of Constantine as Apollo Helios, with a relic of the true cross inside its base by legend. The citizens, a mix of local Greeks, Easterners, and migrating Romans, cheer their emperor who has given them a splendid city. The Bosporus's blue waters sparkle, fleets of ships dock with supplies and goods, and church bells, or perhaps wooden sumantra, as bells were not yet common sound from freshly built churches, symbolizing the Christian spirit of the city. Speaking of churches, Constantine patronizes the building of great basilicas in key cities. In Rome, he commissions, or legalizes, already meeting the Lateran Basilica Street, John Lateran as the Cathedral of the Bishop of Rome, and the old St. Peter's Basilica on Vatican Hill over Peter's tomb. We can imagine Constantine visiting Rome in 315, somewhat modestly, not celebrating a full triumph, as he had executed senators allied with Maxentius perhaps, but instead quietly attending the consecration of the Lateran Church. Perhaps he stands at the back, aware he's not baptized, yet he will only do so on his deathbed, a common practice to wash away sins just in time, listening to hymns echo in the lofty marble hall that used to belong to the Laterani family, but now is Domus Dei, House of God. These are gentle, hopeful moments, the persecuted religion now carrying imperial favor. Under Constantine, the administration continues Diocletian's structure of prefectures and dioceses. The government is more autocratic, but also more orderly. His reign is largely peaceful inside the empire. He fought mostly civil wars to gain power, and some frontier skirmishes, but no major losses. He also reforms the currency again, introducing the gold solidus of 72 to a pound, which remains stable for centuries, a boon for the economy. Thus, trade flourishes quietly. One could buy a fine silk in Antioch or spices in Alexandria, using the same solidus coin that would be accepted in Treverorum or Londinium. In villages, life likely improved as well, with more stable times and imperial benevolence. Constantine had a tendency for clemency, except towards enemies in war. However, not all is perfectly calm. The transition to a Christian empire brings its own tensions. Constantine favors Christians in key offices, and bishops gain influence. The church itself faces internal theological debates, the most famous under Constantine being the Arian controversy about the nature of Christ. Is he divine, and of one substance with the Father, or a created being slightly lesser? To settle this and ensure unity of faith, Constantine calls the Council of Nicaea in 325, a gathering of bishops from all over. We see these bishops, many scarred from the persecution era, like St. Nicholas of Myra or St. Athanasius of Alexandria, converging in the imperial palace at Nicaea. The emperor, robed in purple with a humility that impressed attendees, he reportedly kissed the eyeless cheek of a bishop who had lost an eye for the faith, urges them to agree. After spirited debates, the council produces the Nicene Creed, affirming the Son is of one essence with the Father, a foundational moment for Christian orthodoxy. Constantine rejoices at this harmony in the Church, seeing it as mirroring harmony in the empire. Though Arianism persists, the precedent of emperors guiding church councils is set. Thus, by the time of Constantine's death in 337, the empire is markedly transformed. It's officially supportive of Christianity. It has a new eastern capital, gleaming with fresh marble, and the leadership model is one of sacred monarchy. The emperor, as God's chosen instrument on earth. Constantine indeed legislated Sunday as a holiday, built churches, and lived as a patron of the faith, blurring lines of spiritual and temporal authority. The Roman world, after centuries of tradition, has pivoted gracefully into a new era. We might close our eyes and imagine the state of things around 340 in Constantinople, a bustling, diverse, populous shops under porticos where monks also preach gently about Christ. In Rome, the old temples still stand but see fewer worshippers. Instead, crowds gather at St. Peter's tomb to pray, while the Senate, still pagan for now, quietly carries on its ceremonies, perhaps with less enthusiasm. On the Rhine frontier, soldiers still stand guard in forts, but some now have Chi-Rho emblems on their standards, feeling doubly loyal to Rome and to Christ. In Egypt, hieroglyph-carved temples to Isis and Serapis are less frequented, as congregations fill newly built churches reading scriptures in Greek and Coptic. Change is everywhere, yet to the average farmer or trader, life's cadence, the sowing, the trading voyages, the tax assessments, remains familiar and reassuring. This juxtaposition of continuity and change is the hallmark of Rome's late empire, an empire deeply recognizable as Roman law, roads, coinage, civic life all intact and often flourishing, and yet fundamentally evolving in culture and spirit. We conclude chapter 10 with a scene. Constantine's funeral in Constantinople, 337. The great emperor's body lies in state in the Church of the Holy Apostles, which he built to be his mausoleum. He is arrayed in a sumptuous imperial garment, and around him stand 12 coffins, symbolic empty sarcophagi representing the 12 apostles, making Constantine in death symbolically the 13th apostle, a rather bold, almost saintly image. Soft chants echo as priests pray for his soul. The people file by in reverence, some pagans respectfully remembering he was their sovereign, many Christians venerating the one who ended their torments and elevated their faith. A new chapter begins as his sons take over, not as successfully, but that's another story, and as Christianity spreads further among all classes. We sense that Rome, rejuvenated, sails onward into the 4th century's second half, a big ship steered by new values, still on familiar waters, with calm seas and storms yet to come. We gently end the chapter, noting how far we've journeyed, from Romulus's tiny band of shepherds worshipping Mars by campfires, to an empire of millions venerating a carpenter from Galilee under the sign of the cross. Truly a remarkable odyssey of belief and power, and the night is not over yet. Chapter 11. The Decline of the West, the Long Sunset. As we enter the final chapter of Rome's Western story, the mood becomes elegiac, tinged with golden sadness, like a long summer evening ending. The 4th and 5th centuries see the Western Roman Empire gradually weaken and fragment, even as the Eastern Empire, Byzantium, remains robust. We will describe this decline not as a sudden collapse, but as a slow, fading, a gentle dimming of the light, with moments of drama occasionally flaring. In the decades after Constantine, the empire is often divided among multiple rulers, usually co-emperors east and west, and dynastic politics get tangled. Constantius II, one of Constantine's sons, rules the east competently, fighting Persian king Shapur II to stalemates and patronizing Arian Christianity. In the west, after a period of instability, emerges Julian, the apostate in 360. Julian, a nephew of Constantine raised philosophically in Greece and a secret devotee of the old gods, attempts a last polytheistic revival. For a brief moment, the old pagan temples see state sacrifices again. Imagine in 362, flocks of white oxen being led up to the long quiet altar of Jupiter on the Capitol. Julian himself, sprinkling wine and grain, trying to summon the old Roman spirit. Intellectual pagans rejoice at this renaissance. Libraries copy texts of Neoplatonists, and academies feel hope. But Julian's reign is short-lived. He dies in 363, campaigning in Persia. Some say a Christian soldier in his ranks might have thrown the spear that mortally wounded him. With his last breath, he reportedly murmurs, "Vicisti, Galilei, thou hast conquered, O Galilean," acknowledging that Christianity had won. Indeed, after Julian, all emperors are Christian. The suppression of paganism resumes. Theodosius I ruled, 379, 395. A strong emperor decrees in 380 that Nicene Christianity is the official state religion, and by 391, 392, he bans public pagan worship altogether. The temples are closed, the eternal fire of Vesta extinguished after burning for 1,000 years. One can feel the symbolic weight. In the Roman Forum, the small round temple of Vesta that had housed the sacred flame stands dark and cold, its last 6 Vestal virgins sent away with pensions. The altar of victory is removed from the Senate House. Many aristocrats lament quietly, but the world does not end. They adapt, some converting sincerely, others superficially. Christianity becomes truly embedded. Churches now outnumber temples in many cities of the West. Theodosius is also the last man to rule a united empire. At his death in 395, he divides it permanently between his young sons. Arcadius in the east, Constantinople, and Honorius in the west, Milan, Ravenna. This division, while meant to be administrative, proves critical, as the West lacks vigor and wealth compared to the East now. Honorius is a weak ruler, dominated by his general Stilicho, who is half Vandal, illustrating how barbarian talent had integrated into Roman service. Now begins the truly harrowing part for the Western Empire. Barbarian migrations, invasions. Pressured by the Huns moving into Europe from the east, whole Gothic nations seek refuge across the Danube. In 376, the Eastern Emperor Valens allows the Visigoths to enter as federates, but mistreatment leads them to revolt. In 378, at the Battle of Adrianople, Valens rashly engages the Goths without Western help. The Roman army is annihilated, and Valens himself is killed. This is a shocking blow. An emperor slain by barbarians, the the legions decimated. Ammianus wrote, "It was the worst defeat since Cannae." The Goths then wander, eventually reaching Italy under their young leader Alaric. On a still, warm August day in 410, something unimaginable happens. Rome is sacked by Alaric's Visigoths. For 3 days, these former Federate troops, now angry at broken promises, plunder the city that had not fallen to an enemy in 800 years, since the Gauls of Brennus in 390 B.C. We imagine the terror and shock. Flames consuming noble mansions on the Caelian hill, Goths breaking into mausoleums to loot golden urns, women and men dragged as slaves, though Christian churches, like Street, Peter's, are reportedly respected as sanctuaries by these Arian Christian Goths. The psychological impact is enormous. Street, Jerome in Bethlehem writes, "The city which had taken the whole world was itself taken. Many Romans cannot fathom it. It's as if the earth shifted off its axis. Pagan voices blame the abandonment of the old gods." Street Augustine, Bishop of Hippo in North Africa, responds with his monumental work, The City of God, arguing that earthly cities rise and fall, but the city of God endures, a comfort to bewildered Christians. Although Rome's sack is traumatic, the empire's actual power center in the west had already moved to Ravenna. Honorius made it his capital for its strong defenses amid marshes. But symbolically, 410 marks the beginning of the end. The Visigoths move on and settle eventually in Gaul and then Spain, founding their own kingdom, yet still claiming to be acting in Rome's name loosely. Meanwhile, across the Rhine, on the last day of 406, swarms of Vandals, Suebi, and Alans, pushed by chain reactions of the Huns, cross the frozen Rhine and flood into Gaul. The frontiers, stripped of troops, many recalled by usurpers or used in civil wars, cannot hold. These groups roam, plundering Gaul's rich cities. Mogontiacum is destroyed, Trier badly damaged. In 409, Vandals and Alans cross into Spain. The Roman defense system is fragmenting. One shining figure arises to salvage the West's remnants. General Flavius Aetius, a masterful soldier, raised partly among the Huns as a hostage. He knew their ways. Aetius becomes power behind the throne for the weak Emperor Valentinian III, Honorius's successor. Aetius cleverly uses Federate barbarian forces to balance each other. His most famous moment is in 451, when the dreaded Attila the Hun invades Gaul with a huge host, having already savaged the Eastern Empire. Attila, called the Scourge of God, is lured by weak defense and promises of easy loot. Aetius forms an unprecedented coalition of Romans and barbarians, Visigoths under King Theodoric I, who by now settled in Aquitaine, and others to resist Attila. They clash at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains, Chalons. It's one of the ancient world's largest battles. One can envision the horizon dark with Hunnic horsemen, their composite bows raining arrows, met by the shield wall of Roman troops and the heavy cavalry of Visigoths. The fighting is brutally hard. Theodoric is killed, but Attila is finally repulsed. The Huns retreat. Attila lives, but his aura of invincibility is dented. The next year, he invades Italy, ravaging the north. Legend has it, Pope Leo I met Attila at the gates of Rome and persuaded him to turn back, aided perhaps by plague in Attila's army, and news that eastern forces threatened his base. In 453, Attila dies suddenly, and the Hunnic Empire collapses as his sons fight. Aetius saved the West from the immediate Hunnic threat, but ironically, he is murdered in 454 by the paranoid Emperor Valentinian III, who then himself is assassinated by Aetius's loyalists. After this, the Western Empire spins out of control. With weak emperors propped up by Germanic generals, its authority erodes. The Vandals, now in North Africa, do the unthinkable next. In 455, under King Gaiseric, they sail to Italy and sack Rome a second time. This time there's less resistance. Rome has no real army. For 14 days, Vandals systematically plunder the city, hence vandalism. They haul off treasures, even the gilded roof tiles of the Temple of Jupiter, and thousands of Romans as slaves. The impression is of utter helplessness. The Western Empire is by now mostly a fiction. Gaul is carved up Visigoths in southwest, Burgundians in the Rhone Valley, Franks expanding in the north. Spain largely lost Suebi in the northwest. Visigoth influence elsewhere. North Africa, gone to Vandals, who now cut off Rome's grain supply, causing famine. Britain was abandoned by Rome back in 4-1. 08's legions recalled to fight on the continent, and now Britons struggle against Saxon invaders on their own. All that remains under direct Western Roman control by 472 is Italy and some patches of Gaul. The Western emperors become mere puppets of Germanic warlords, their names obscure and reigns short. The Eastern Empire, based in Constantinople, still considers itself the Roman Empire and occasionally tries to intervene, but is focused on its own sphere. Finally, in 476, the curtain falls. The Germanic foederati in Italy, angry at not receiving promised land, revolt under their leader Odoacer. They depose the last Western emperor, the teenage Romulus Augustulus, notably his name, Romulus, founder's name, Augustulus, little Augustus, is poetic for the last emperor. We can picture the scene in Ravenna. Romulus, just a boy, hands over the purple cloak and diadem to Odoacer in the imperial palace, perhaps with a sigh of relief as much as sorrow. He hadn't wanted the heavy mantle. Odoacer, pragmatically, does not claim the imperial title for himself. Instead, he sends the imperial regalia to Constantinople, to Emperor Zeno, and declares he'll rule Italy as king in nominal loyalty to the Eastern Emperor. It's basically an acknowledgement that the Western imperial throne is no more. Thus, 476 is traditionally given as the fall of the Western Roman Empire, but to those alive at the time, it may not have felt sharply different than the slow decline they'd been living through. In fact, Italy, under Odoacer, saw more stability than under the previous puppet emperors. The Senate still met in Rome. People still called themselves Romans. The structures of Roman law, though evolving, persisted in these new barbarian kingdoms, many of which sought legitimacy by keeping Roman institutions. No sudden civilizational collapse happened on that day. Indeed, a majority of the population in the former empire probably didn't even know or care about Romulus Augustulus's fate, but symbolically, the line of Western emperors from Augustus ended with a whimper. Let us paint a melancholically calm scene for this transition. Rome, around 480 A.D. The city is much changed, its population perhaps a third of what it was at its height, due to plague, sieges, economic shrinkage. Many grand temples are closed or crumbling. The forum's basilicas are quieter, maybe a market still there but smaller. The Senate House might be closed or used only for town council meetings. Christian churches are now the bustling centres, Street Peter's outside the walls, Street John Lateran, Santa Maria Maggiore, filled with worshippers and the chant of monks and clergy. The aqueducts still flow for now, but some building projects have halted. You walk down the Via Appia and see grass growing between the paving stones where legions once marched. The baths of Caracalla stand empty, weeds overtaking their once elegant mosaics, because maintaining such luxuries is beyond the city's means. Yet, on the Palatine, one of Odoacer's officers now occupies a portion of the old imperial palace, keeping a semblance of authority. In the streets, you hear a mix of Latin dialects and Germanic tongues from mercenaries or barbarian settlers. Life goes on in a simpler, reduced way. Perhaps a group of schoolboys still learn their letters and Virgil, but under a minor deacon's tutelage rather than a famed rhetorician. A blacksmith still bangs away in his workshop, shoeing horses for Gothic cavalrymen now instead of Roman ones. The afternoon sun still warms the Colosseum's arches, but they host no games. Maybe a few families have even moved into its lower vaults for shelter. The Western Empire's end is a transition, not an apocalypse. One world gently shades into another. People carry on, hardly aware that historians of the future will pinpoint an end date in their lifetime. For them, an idea, Romanitas, simply evolved. The spirit of Rome lived on. In the Christian Church, the Bishop of Rome, now called Pope, wields moral influence, even as emperors vanish. In the new barbarian kings, who lawfully admire Roman culture and issue law codes, influenced by Roman law, in the very Latin language, which continues to be spoken and will transform but persist as the basis of new languages. Roman roads still connect towns, and Roman bridges still span rivers, used by peasants and merchants each day without a thought to who built them. And in the East, the Roman Empire decidedly has not fallen at all. Constantinople stands as the new eternal city for 1,000 more years. Eastern emperors like Justinian in the 6th century even reclaim Italy and North Africa for a time, seeking to resurrect the Roman glory. But that's beyond our Western-focused scope. Let us take a final reflective scene. Imagine standing on the Janiculum Hill, overlooking Rome at sunset in, say, A.D. 493. Now, Italy is ruled by Theodoric the Ostrogoth, who, interestingly, presents himself as king of both Goths and Romans, keeping the Senate and Roman administration in place, while Goths form the army. The city below is peaceful but subdued. The Tiber reflects the amber light, ruins of fallen monuments, some collapsed by neglect, others stripped for materials, cast long shadows, interspersed with newly built churches, whose crosses catch the last sunbeam. Perhaps an elderly Roman, say a senator of the old school born in the mid-400 seconds, stands with you. He remembers when he was young, attending a recitation in the baths of Trajan, or witnessing a triumph of a short-lived emperor, memories of a fading golden age. He sighs at how much has changed. Roma immortalis est, he says softly. Rome is immortal. He might be comforting himself that although the empire's power is gone, its memory and influence will never die. In that, he is correct beyond his wildest imagination. Rome's legacy, its law, architecture, literature, and ideal of unity will indeed shape the world for millennia, even as the physical empire is no more. As darkness falls and stars emerge one by one, we close our eyes and sense the presence of all those we encountered on this journey. Romulus by his fire, Caesar astride his charger, Augustus in his marble forum, Constantine, Under the Labarum, and countless others. Their voices now whispers in the wind that rustles through the forum's pines. The Western Roman Empire has gone to sleep, its day done, but it is not a fearful sleep. It is like an old majestic oak that, having weathered storms, gently yields to time, dropping its last acorns so that new trees may grow. So Rome falls, not with a bang of doom, but with the soft acceptance of twilight. As the historian Procopius later wrote, the city of Rome was a thing to be marveled at and spoken of, and no longer to be seen. Yet it lives on in the successor realms, in the Christian church, in the idea of what it is to be civilized and connected. Chapter 12. The Legacy of Rome. Eternal Echoes. In the quiet that follows the Western Empire's fall, we reflect by the metaphorical dying embers of its once blazing fire. But those embers, though faint, ignite countless new flames across distant ages. The legacy of Rome is vast and enduring. Truly, Rome did not so much die as transform and live on in different forms. Let's begin with the obvious heir, the Eastern Roman, Byzantine Empire. In Constantinople, emperors continued to call themselves Basileus Romion, Emperor of the Romans, until 1453. The Eastern Empire preserved Roman law, administrative systems, and high culture for 1,000 years. After 476, in magnificent Hagia Sophia, a cathedral built by Emperor Justinian in 537, we can still hear echoes of Roman statecraft blended with Greek Christian learning, the gold mosaics shimmering with an imperial majesty that traces back to Augustus. Justinian himself compiled the Corpus Juris Civilis, body of civil law, in the 6th century, a monumental codification of Roman law that would later inform the legal systems of Europe. Each time a modern court weighs evidence and reason, one can sense the rational spirit of Roman jus guiding the scales. In Western Europe, though the empire fell, the idea of Rome as a universal authority lingered. Latin language, once just the tongue of Latium's farmers, became the mother of the Romance languages. Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Romanian. To this day, when an Italian says amor, a French amor, a Spanish amor, they all speak with the echo of Latin amor, love, as once whispered in Roman forums and written by Latin poets. Even English, largely Germanic, is filled with Latin-derived words, especially in law, science, and literature, a direct result of Rome's long shadow over Western culture. Consider also Christianity, the faith that Rome first persecuted, then adopted, then carried to the world. The Roman Empire's infrastructure allowed the church to spread everywhere. By the end of the 4th century, Christianity was entrenched across the empire, and missionaries later carried it to barbarian kingdoms beyond. The organization of the church itself mimicked Roman administration, dioceses, archbishops, the very title Pontifex Maximus, supreme priest, once held by emperors, now applied to the Pope. After the Western Empire's fall, the papacy in Rome gradually assumed a role of cultural and even political leadership, preserving knowledge and offering unity. In 800 AD, when Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne as Emperor of the Romans, it showed Rome's imperial idea lived on, transplanted into what became the Holy Roman Empire, a realm that famously Voltaire quipped was neither holy, Roman, nor an empire. Yet it persisted in claiming Rome's legacy until 1806. To this day, The Pope's influence and the use of Latin as the official language of the Roman Catholic Church remain as deeply Roman footprints in the spiritual soil of the West. Rome's physical and intellectual infrastructure likewise seeded future growth. Roman roads, some still visible, like the Via Appia with its paving stones grooved by chariot wheels, became the paths along which medieval trade and travel flowed, and many modern highways follow their routes. The saying, "all roads lead to Rome," holds symbolic truth. The connectivity Rome built enabled later societies to flourish in its tracks. Roman aqueducts and arches taught later builders principles of engineering. The great cathedrals of medieval Europe were constructed by architects who studied Roman ruins for inspiration. If you stand in the US Capitol's rotunda or under the dome of St. Paul's in London, you are essentially under the shadow of the Pantheons and St. Peter's domes, themselves descendants of Roman engineering. Roman concrete, that humble mix of lime and pozzolana, still holds up structures like the Pantheon's dome after 1900 years, and its rediscovery was key to modern construction. Roman law and republican ideals infused later political thought. The concept of a senate, of a balance of powers, of civic duty, illustrated by heroes like Cincinnatus, inspired the founders of the United States. Compare Cincinnatus being called from his plow to lead, and then returning to his farm, with George Washington retiring to Mount Vernon after 2 terms. The very architecture of government buildings in Washington, D.C., replete with Corinthian columns and Roman domes, testifies to conscious emulation of Rome's republic and empire as models of governance and authority. Many European languages still use words derived from Caesar jar, Kaiser, to mean emperor, and Rome became shorthand for ultimate temporal power. In the field of ideas, Greco-Roman philosophy and literature, transmitted by Rome, fed the Renaissance and Enlightenment. Without monastic scribes in former Roman lands copying Virgil, Cicero, and Lucretius, or without Justinian's law code refound in the 11th century at Bologna, the intellectual rebirth of Europe might have been delayed or different. When we read Shakespeare or Montesquieu, or even contemporary works, we often trace lines back to Ovid, Seneca, and Tacitus. Every time a student struggles with a geometric proof or a chart of the Julian calendar, and note, the Gregorian calendar we use today is a slight tweak of Julius Caesar's calendar, they are grappling with Rome's intellectual heritage. Culturally, the idea of Rome as the eternal city of grandeur inspired countless generations. Medieval pilgrims visited its ruins and holy sites. Renaissance artists like Michelangelo studied its statues, Laocoon, Apollo Belvedere, to learn anatomy and beauty, and even today, tourists toss coins in the Trevi Fountain because an old legend promises they will return. A legend, perhaps not Roman, but appropriate, as if Rome itself refuses to let those who love it remain away forever. So, as we conclude, imagine a kind of time-lapse image, Rome's physical power dimming in the 5th century twilight, but its spiritual light scattering into myriad stars overhead. Each star is a piece of Rome's legacy shining down through time. One star for Roman law, still guiding justice. One star for Latin literature, enriching languages. One for Christian faith, providing moral unity. One for engineering ingenuity. One for political theory of republic and empire. One for art and architecture. Countless stars for the lives of the people who, generation after generation, carried some Roman blood or culture across continents, from Europe to Africa to Asia, eventually to the Americas and Oceania with colonization. Truly, as the historian Rutilius Nemetianus wrote in the 5th century addressing Rome, "You have made a city of the once world, O Rome." Even as an empire, Rome fell. As a civilizing idea, it simply permeated the globe. Let's close with a gentle night scene in Rome, perhaps a millennium after the fall, say A.D. 1500, Renaissance era. We stand again on the Palatine, like many chapters ago, but now as an observer of continuity. The Colosseum is half ruin, stones reused in churches, yet a cross stands in its arena, commemorating martyrs, transforming bloodsport grounds into a place of piety. On Capitoline Hill, Michelangelo is redesigning the piazza, placing a bronze of Marcus Aurelius, long revered in error as Constantine, but regardless treasured at its center, literally putting a Roman philosopher-emperor in the heart of modern Rome. St. Peter's new basilica is rising, its design full of classical cues revived. The air is filled with new excitement. Printing presses churn out copies of Cicero's philosophical treatises, recovered from monastic libraries, and explorers across the ocean name newly found lands Nova Roma, or use Latin on maps to honor the tradition. In short, Rome's legacy is experiencing a rebirth. The Renaissance meaning rebirth of classical antiquity. Even the concept of empire finds new life, as European kings style themselves heirs of Rome's Caesars, and Moscow starts calling itself the Third Rome, after Constantinople's fall in 1453. Thus, the legacy of Rome is like a gentle and pervasive perfume that never dissipated. From our calendar months, July for Julius, August for Augustus, to legal maxims habeas corpus, ex, post facto, etc., to architectural forms, domes, arches, stadiums, to the letters shaping our writing. The Latin alphabet is used by billions today. The historian Edward Gibbon, whose cadence we've avoided but whose theme we've lived, closed his work on the decline and fall, not with despair, but with a kind of awe at the triumph of barbarism and religion, acknowledging that what replaced Rome was deeply influenced by it. Our journey that began with a humble shepherd by the Tiber in a myth now ends not in sorrow, but in reflection. All things that rise must fall, wrote a Roman poet. Yet we see that in falling, Rome handed on a torch. The eternal city earned its name not by defying time physically, but by ensuring its spirit was eternal in human civilization. So, in a calm, poetic sense, we leave the story of Rome as one leaves a dear old friend at the end of a long evening. The friend goes to rest. The Western Empire sleeps in the earth, but their voice echoes in our mind. Whenever laws are just, whenever roads connect peoples, whenever a dome rises against the sky, whenever a literary turn of phrase invokes ancient wit, we hear that echo, Roma Invicta. It is late night now in our narrative. The fires have burned low. The marble ruins of the Forum lie silver under the moon, silent yet speaking volumes to those who listen. We bid good night to Romulus and Caesar, to Augustus and Constantine, to all the countless souls of Rome's story. In the hush, perhaps we feel a gentle breeze, the spirit of Rome passing by, and it whispers as if in Virgilian verse, "These monuments of marble and thought shall last, so long as men are men." And with that comforting thought, we, like the Romans of old, retire, carrying Rome within us, knowing that from its entire story, from legendary birth to imperial twilight, some part will forever live on in us and those who come after. If this quiet journey through the ages has brought you comfort and insight, we gently remind you to leave a token of appreciation, a like or kind word, so that more sleepy minds may find their way to these soothing tales of the past. In sharing these stories, we all become keepers of memory, passing the lamp of history gently from one to another.